Okay, colleagues, that's gone 3 o'clock. Rona, Diane, could I just check where we are we elected members? Is Councillor Wilson back in or not?
He's still in twice, I'm afraid.
Certainly one of them went out. David, are you with us? He doesn't seem to be with us. Could somebody try and contact him?
Yeah, Diane will give him a ring.
Graham, you're here observing again, are you? Plotting for punishment?
I can hear you, Stephen.
No, I was talking to Graham there. Can you hear us, David? That's good. Okay, so
every time I press video, it disappears.
Right, maybe keep the video off.
So,
okay, right. We'll proceed. Okay. Policy substitutions and declarations of interest.
All the members of the committee are here. And I have one declaration of interest in item 12 from Councillor Robertson. It's financial interest in Stepwell. And when we come to that item, Dan will move Councillor Robertson to the lobby and readmit her to the meeting after that item. Can I ask if there are any other declarations of interest?
Okay, is anybody indicating another declaration of interest? No? Okay,
thank you.
As usual, if you could indicate in the chat that you want to speak, and obviously keep your mute button on while not speaking. Okay, item 2 on our agenda is the COVID-19 coronavirus scrutiny report. That's obviously been issued in a separate paper to try and provide the most up-to-date information. And we obviously, many of us will know that the First Minister has just announced in Parliament that Inverclyde will stay in level 3 for at least the next week, which hopefully is a positive sign. Aubrey will introduce the report, then as usual we'll go through it section by section to see if anybody's got any questions or comments. So, Aubrey.
Okay, convener, I assume everybody can hear me? Yeah, okay, good. This is our normal COVID-19 scrutiny report for members' consideration. I don't intend to go through it in detail. It's reasonably self-explanatory, and the directors will pick up any particular questions around their service areas once we go into questions. Issues regarding introduction of a new day centre delivery identified in the recommendation, as well as resumption of on-street limited stake parking. And also item in relation to Bridgewater Housing Association. The one item I was going to cover in a wee bit of detail was in relation to the study by Public Health Scotland into the level of deaths in Inverclyde at the outset of the pandemic. Useful to provide members with some sort of context. Back in sort of mid-April, end of April, Inverclyde was running at roughly 3 times the Scottish death rate for COVID. And in more recent times, based on NRS figures, clearly things have improved, if you can use that term, improved in terms of death rates. Inverclyde is no longer the highest death rate based on the figures that we have analysed. We've been overtaken by our joint neighbour West Dunbartonshire, and our current rate is roughly not 3 times, but 1 3/4 times that of the Scottish average. So it's still extremely high, but certainly not as bad as it was in rate terms. Members will be aware that I had engagement with the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport, Jean Freeman, back in mid-June, and I asked for Public Health Scotland to undertake a study into why Inverclyde had so many COVID deaths. And at that time, I posed 3 questions. asking how did COVID come into Inverclyde, how was it transmitted, and what action could be taken to avoid such a situation in future. The report, members, is in Appendix 1. There are some technical aspects, and I'm not a technical public health person, so if there was further clarification needed, I'm quite happy to go back to Public Health Scotland and the University of Glasgow. But what seems to come out of it was that there was a particular strain. I'm getting some feedback. I don't know what that's from. Okay, I'll keep going and hopefully everybody can hear me. Derek, can you hear me?
Could everybody go on mute, please? If you're not on mute.
Aubrey, I think it's because Councillor Wilson's in twice again.
Yes, yes. One's bad enough, but twice is just not good, really. Right. Okay. So in terms of the actual type of infection, there was a particular lineage or strain of COVID infection known as UK40. That seemed to affect quite a large number of the people who were infected at that time. But there were other strains that were also present. So it can't be just said that the UK40 strain was the sole focus of why it was brought in. Evidence suggests that the early infections, people infected, was as a result of possibly travelling outside the area, abroad that is. There is a recognition that there was an outbreak in the Inverclyde dialysis unit. Public Health Scotland said that was managed, and Public Health colleague says that was managed appropriately and rapidly, and clearly wasn't seen as a focus for wider spread within the community. GG&C's Public Health Protection Team was not aware of any particular event which might have spawned or amplified the transmission. And in terms of the report, no action is proposed in the report to avoid such a high death rate in the future. But there is a recognition, an acknowledgement that underlying health issues and the level of deprivation in an area can be a significant factor. So that was the general thrust of the report. I can't say that specifically any of that questions were, I've been back to and fro with colleagues in the University of Glasgow and Public Health Scotland. But it does demonstrate that clearly as time goes on, we get a wee bit more information, but there isn't enough to give precise answers to all the questions that's presented. So, Convener, I'm happy to take any questions. And the directors are also here to take any questions relating to the detail of the report.
Okay, thanks, Aubrey. We'll get through the report section by section. And if members indicate if they wish to ask a question or make a comment. So we'll start the HSCP section, paragraph 5.3 to 5.6. Any questions on that? Tommy?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. My question's on the care homes. Louise, are you happy that the actions that have been taken are sufficient to resolve the issues which resulted in the care homes being downgraded? Thanks.
Louise?
Through yourself, Convener. Members may be aware that the Care Inspectorate have added in a new quality indicator 7. This is specifically about infection control. It's new. Doing infection control in places where people live is quite complex and quite difficult. And across, not just GG&C, not just Inverclyde or GG&C, but across the country, care homes who traditionally have done very well, who have been graded very good and good, have failed on infection control. Infection control is really important for COVID and how we deal with COVID. But we currently have infection control nurses that we've deployed from the board. In fact, one was out at one of our care homes yesterday, who are helping us to help the providers understand what they need to do. We've also done webinars and training in relation to PPE, and we've set up a website in GG&C at the Health Board which holds all the guidance, all the training, all the webinars, as well as providing practical advice. And for the a couple of care homes that have been affected in Inverclyde, we have deployed our own staff from the HSCP who've been working with the care home providers. And so I'm as confident as I can be that we're doing everything we can to help them raise their standards.
Okay, thanks for that.
Tommy, I don't see any other questions on this section. Oh, Jana, you want to come in? You're still on mute, Jana.
How's that?
That's you.
We were talking about how the figures were down here. I have a little piece of paper in front of me, and I've read this out to Aubrey as well. And it's regarding the hospital, and they've got what they call different pathways. They've got a green, they've got a red, they've got an amber 1, amber 2, amber 3, and they're people who have either got it, not got it, over 70, and various things. And when they're getting taken up, they're taken up in the one lift. And this is one of the things that was asked, is this is what's caused our numbers to go up. Because if I've got it, I shouldn't be in a lift with somebody that's not got it, irrespective of what age it is. And surely if they've made this pathway, these pathways, people should blooming well stick to them, excuse the language, to make sure the safety, not just of the patient, but themselves. And I found that sad when I got this, and this was from the hospital telling me that. And I think that's something we've got to check out. And as I said, what annoyed me at the very beginning was if it was, I keep saying if there's a disaster somewhere else, we would send people down to wherever that disaster was and help. And I think that's right. And yet nobody, as far as I'm concerned, came down to the hospital because this was something new. You were in a blind corner, and we should have been working with a bigger team to help us go over that first one. But that's. I just wonder why the pathways and why they're not doing it that way.
Okay, Louise, are you able to help on that?
Through yourself, convener. Apologies, I don't know enough about the flow. I know about some of the pathways and I know about the flow in relation to going into care homes, but I don't know enough about that to make any comment.
Okay, maybe if you could have a chat with Councillor Rebecca offline.
Okay, happy to do that.
Okay, John Crowther, you want to ask a question?
I could send her a copy of this. I'll email her a copy of the pathways, and that'll maybe give you a bit of information as well, Louise.
Okay, thanks, Jana.
That'd be very helpful, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question. Again, it's to do with the care homes. I've just noticed there on the national press, and it's really south of the border, where they're hoping that there'll be further testing, which would allow visitations to care homes. Now, I know that this currently applies only in England, but has anyone been in contact with the Scottish Government to find out if they have got any similar type plans which would allow testing in care homes, and in the run up to Christmas, New Year, that could possibly mean visitations?
Louise, you want to come in on that?
Through yourself, convener. I sit on the National Pandemic Response Group, and I'm also the lead for care homes across GG&C and for the chiefs officers across Scotland. And so I feel as if care homes would be my specialist subject if I ever had one. And so what I would say is Inverclyde is going to be a pilot site for a pilot that we're doing in relation to visiting and indoor visiting and whether relatives can be tested, and two of our care homes have volunteered in relation to that. We have there is a lot of work happening in the field in relation to indoor visiting, and obviously because of the team, the rest of GG&C won't be looking at that in any kind of depth, but we will continue to look at that in the forthcoming weeks. And what I would say is that there's lots of things that we're doing in relation to this stage 4 guidance, which is going to come out from government, which has a whole range of actions in order to make people feel more confident and more safe, and so that we can get some of the visiting. And people are acutely aware that Christmas is on its way, and it's very important that families get to see their loved ones. And so that's one of the reasons that we volunteered to do that kind of test in Inverclyde. And the results of that will be shared within the next. The test starts next week, and then the results will be shared in 2 weeks' time with all the providers in Inverclyde, and we can all risk assessments have been done for every building so far.
Thank you for that, Louise. I'll give you a big thumbs up on that one. Thank you.
John, the First Minister made a number of announcements around testing as part of her statement today, and I think she did mention care home testing as well. But she also mentioned that the government were looking at following the example in Liverpool in terms of the mass community testing. And I've already written to the First Minister previously asking for us to be considered as a pilot for mass community testing. I'm waiting for a response. That's not to say we will be chosen, but I've certainly asked for us to be considered as a pilot for mass community testing. So we'll see what the response is. Okay, I don't see any other questions in that section. So moving on to education and communities, paragraphs 5.7 to 5.12. Any questions? No, I don't see any questions on that. Okay, moving on to Environment, Regeneration, Resources, 5.13 to 5.19. No, don't see any questions. Okay, section 6 is to do with COVID testing. Any questions on that? Tommy?
Thanks, convener. Just a question for Louise. I note that we test for care home staff on a weekly basis. We don't do that with our care staff who are in and out of different houses doing their caring work. I'm just understand what's the rationale behind that in a national level, not even at a local level.
Louise?
For yourself, convener, I've just come off a call, a national call about testing and care at home services and developing the pathway in relation to that. It's quite complex because of the sheer number of people in relation to care at home services and the different routes it's provided by independent third sector and local authorities. You've got people that do personal care, but there are, I don't know if it was announced, it's just been announced in relation to that, but there is a commitment by government to test the wider social care workforce, which includes care at home services, and they're currently looking at the pathways in relation to that and how to make sure to see how that can happen.
Okay, thanks, Louise.
Okay, moving on to section 7, which is related to the issues that Aubrey covered earlier on in terms of the report from Public Health Scotland. Anybody get any questions or comments on that? Don't see any. I mean, I think we've obviously got some further information and probably parts of the jigsaw are being filled in, but we probably haven't got all the answers that we were looking for. But it doesn't look as if, I suppose, the information is necessarily there in terms of answering all our questions because of the lack of sort of testing and tracing in the sort of early stages of the pandemic. But I think we're a wee bit further on in terms of maybe we'll have to wait till potentially the public inquiry takes place into a number of issues around coronavirus. Okay, moving on to section 8, workforce issues. And I see Robert's got a question. Robert? You're on mute again, Robert. That's you. Oh, back in mute. That's you. Back in mute. That's you.
Right, thank you, Gavira. The IT is not put. My question is, with the programme on today, and they say that people who are self-isolated, working from home, are mainly middle class and are protected. Well, won't make a lot of sense. But we've got a lot of staff who are frontline staff who don't have that luxury of working from home, who have to count their tasks every other day in the cold face it was. Have we taken any extra precautions to protect these members of staff who don't have this luxury of work from home and have to do these very essential jobs every day? And if we are taking any precautions, we make sure that they don't hit burnout, because these guys and women are on the front line every other day, and they don't have this luxury of the working from home. And is there any special protection for the frontline workers who have not this luxury of working from home?
Okay, Stephen McNabbin.
Thank you, convener. Yes, thanks, Councillor Moran, for that question. Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing a number of things to support our frontline workers, because we do appreciate that there is home working is available, but there's obviously some jobs out there that are just not practical and can't be done from home. I think some of the things we have been putting in place, we've been working very closely with the trade unions, first of all, and we're meeting with them on a fortnightly basis regarding workforce issues for those that are coming to work. And a big focus of those meetings are around risk assessments, first of all, to make sure that the workplace is safe for everybody that's coming in to the workplace, making sure they've got the appropriate PPE to support them in carrying out their duties. You also mentioned there that burnout as well, that's obviously been a major factor. You know, we've had a look at annual leave and support for employees. We have given guidance to employees and managers about the importance of taking a break and taking annual leave and making sure they take a proportion of that so that they do get a rest from their duties. We've put a number of support mechanisms in around just supporting the well-being of employees as well, particularly around mental health. And we're about to do some training for managers around that as well that will help to support employees within their team. And we had a recent survey that was issued to all frontline staff as well around mental health and how they were feeling at this moment in time and what their experience of the working environment is at the moment. And there was a number of actions that were taken forward out of that. So I think working closely with the trade unions and employees themselves, making sure we're following health and safety and government guidance, we're putting as many measures as we can in place, Councillor Moran, to support our employees that are on the front line.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. You okay with that, Robert? You're on mute again, Robert. That's you.
Thanks for that, Stephen. But I mean, I just want the staff who are on the front line think that somehow they've been disadvantaged because they can't get this luxury of working from home. And the well-being is very important. And it's important that the managers out there be these people and thank them every day. They're doing a great job and they're fully appreciated with everybody within the council.
And that's well said, Robert. Sure, we would all endorse those comments. Okay, Ronnie, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's on 8.3 on the absence rate. I see that, excuse me, it appears to me that the council-wide absence rate seems to have come down a wee bit. Based on the 10th of November stats. Maybe Stephen could just give us some words of advice on that. I realise that it's measured separately, but I wonder if we had any indication as to the absence levels locally of the teaching fraternity. Do we know how many teachers we have basically off sick or off shielding or off isolating or whatever at present? Thanks.
Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Thanks, Councillor Alfield. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the positive news is you'll see from the absence stats that they are going in the right direction, I suppose, over the last few weeks in terms of a reduction in absence levels across the key areas of the workforce and in general. So I think that's just, that's been a sign of the support mechanisms that have been put in place. There's been some changes in government guidance around supporting people back to work, even those who are shielding and those that have underlying health conditions, and making sure that we're making the workplace safe for them. So I think that's resulted in more people coming back to work. I can't give you specific figures at this moment in time around the teachers, but I'm happy to gather that for you because I know that we are gathering it centrally as part of gathering these overall stats together. I think that the absence, in general amongst teaching staff is fairly low. There's no major concerns that's certainly being highlighted at this moment in time. But we do gather that, so I'm happy to get that information to Councillor Alfield, specifically related to teachers. I just don't have it on me at this moment in time.
Okay, Ruth wants to come in. Ruth?
We report weekly on our teachers and support staff as well. So I can say as of the 10th of November, we were looking at 29 teachers and support staff being absent. Now, what I would say is it's consistently been between 20 and 30. I think I said that last time. So last week we were at 29, and that's made up of 16 teachers, 13 support staff, and that's how it's broken up. We are, as Stephen's just said, we're probably not one of the big hitters in the absence statistics nationally, and we're faring fairly well on this.
I think it's fair to say there's a close correlation between the sort of level of the virus in local authority areas and absences as well. Tends to be the higher rated council areas have got higher levels of absence in education. Okay, any other questions or comments? No. Okay, just one thing, Aubrey, on the recovery plans. Obviously, we've agreed both the internal recovery plan and the external, the partnership recovery plan. I think it would be useful for us to get progress reports on those. So maybe we could have an update for the next meeting of the committee, just in terms of progress we're making on the recovery plans.
Okay, convener, that we'll take note of that and make sure that's an update provided.
Okay, colleagues, no other questions. Are we happy to agree the recommendations in the report? Yeah, I see indications. Okay, thanks for that. Right, that takes us on to item 3 in our report, which is the 2021 General Fund Revenue Budget as at the 30th of September. And Alan's going to speak to that report.
Thank you, convener, and good afternoon, everyone. This is the usual report, and it is showing a projected £469,000 underspend as at period 6. It also provides an update in terms of the overall reserves and the earmarked reserves. And Appendix 4 is a new appendix, and that shows what the council has currently spent or is estimated to spend in terms of addressing COVID, and between the general fund and the IJB, the social work element of the IJB, it's sitting at £20.5 million, of which about 900,000 is currently unallocated. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Elizabeth, you want to come in?
Thank you, Stephen. Just a couple of questions. Alan, 2.3 of the report indicates that information about the council tax income reducing due to COVID is detailed in section 6, but I can't see anything in section 6 about that unless I'm being incomplete, I guess, in what I'm looking at. That would be the first thing. And this, well, wait, yeah, that one first.
Alan?
Thank you, Elizabeth. You've kept me on my toes there. That relates to Appendix 4 and the loss of income, which I'm reporting in the corporate elements. So that should be on page 11 of the agenda for those of you with hard copy, where we're projecting a £630,000 council tax shortfall this year, plus an increase in the demand for council tax reduction as people's incomes have gone down and individuals have unfortunately lost their jobs. So the two of those together are building up to the figure which I'm reporting in the report. So sorry for misleading you.
That's okay. It was just the figure. I wasn't sure what was kind of adding up to that figure, but thank you for that. And the question I've got is really just on 2.6 about the balance of 7.1 million being contained either in budget underspends or funded from reserves, and it's really just to get a sense of is that in line with where we thought things were going to be, with the level of funding we were going to get to support us. Is it higher, is it lower, or is it about where we thought things were going to be?
Thank you. When I reported to the August Policy and Resources Committee, members agreed to set aside about 4.7 million in reserves, and that was on the basis that was all needed. As the report indicates, there is currently £924,000 of that not allocated. That is largely due to the fact that the government, Scottish Government, has come up with more money since August. There was extra money for education, just over £250,000 there. There's extra money for council tax reduction support, etc. So our costs are probably pretty much in line with what was being projected, but we're getting more support, and I'm hopeful that there's more support to come through the income scheme as well. I've put the return in for the council, and maybe there's other consequential money. All that will help either set aside money for costs that we're not aware of if the COVID situation continues, or it will allow us to put some money back into reserves, which those members on the Members' Budget Working Group are aware is something we're looking at as well.
Okay. I don't see any other questions from colleagues, so can we agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4, 2023 capital programme again, Alan.
Thank you. This is the latest position of the 2023 capital programme and reports a 15% advancement, largely due to the advanced purchase of vehicles, which we'll get before the end of the financial year. The plan is that we would roll the programme forward a year, i.e. to 23-24, as part of the budget ultimately to be agreed in the new year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from members? No. Agree recommendations? Okay, moving on to item 5, Policy and Resources Committee, Revenue and Capital Budgets. Alan.
Thank you. This is the committee's own revenue and capital budget. Revenue is reporting 424,000 underspend, and capital is reporting £40,000 slippage. The report also provides an update on the Common Good Fund position and seeks approval to allocate £70,000 from the Digital Strategy earmarked reserve to expand the use of electronic document management into 2 more services of the council. Obviously, the use of electronic document management has been brought to a fore as part of remote and home working. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Any questions from members? No, don't see any. Agree with recommendations. Okay, moving on to item 6, Welfare Reform Update. Again, Alan.
Thank you, Convener. This is the cyclical welfare reform report. Reports a 39% increase in the number of universal credit claimants since March 2020. It gives an update in respect of discretionary housing payments and the Scottish Welfare Fund. Both of these are reporting underspends at this point in time, but that's due to the fact that there's been significant extra resources allocated by the Scottish Government. Our spend in both these areas is higher than previous years at this point in time. The plan would be that any underspend in the Scottish Welfare Fund be added to the earmarked reserves at the end of the financial year. And the report also provides updates in respect of the self-isolation grant. That's the £500 payment. The uptake for this is still very low, we'd have to say, and includes the letters that were written after the last committee to the UK government and the one response that has been received, and updates in respect of the Advice Services and Social Security Scotland as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for that. Question from David and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. Alan, just one question. On the £500 grant, you say uptake has been low. How low is low?
Alan?
Apologies there, I'd never unmuted myself. At the moment, we have made payments. As at the beginning of this week, we had made approximately 21 payments from what I remember. And I think the main issue is around the eligibility criteria is quite tight. This was obviously a UK scheme initially, and the council is administering this on behalf of the Scottish Government at the moment. So we've made 21 payments. I understand in some council areas uptake is higher, and maybe a bit like teachers' absences. It tends to sort of mirror the prevalence of COVID in the local authority area.
Thank you, Alan. I was also very pleased to see the increase in universal credit I think that's encouraging.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Thanks for bringing me in, convener. A question and a comment. The question is 2.5 in the report, and it's about promoting the Scottish Child Payment through the council tax billing communication. I know that there are a significant number of families or households in Inverclyde that don't pay council tax directly. Communication of their council tax. It's really just, I guess, the kind of question I'm trying to get around to is, are we covering everybody who might need to know about the Scottish Child Payment through the communications that we are planning to send out to promote it? Is the first point.
Alan?
Thank you, and it's a pertinent point. I was having my welfare reform board meeting this morning. Colleagues from the Social Security Scotland have had a discussion at a national level, and they want to use a uniform approach regarding communication of the Scottish Child Payment, and that doesn't involve putting leaflets in council tax. I could confirm that every household in Inverclyde does get a letter, whether they pay council tax or not, but they don't want to use that approach. Rather, they'd prefer to go through schools and early years establishments, so that's the route that they're going through. I can also advise committee that the assessment by Fiscal Affairs Scotland on behalf of the SSSA is that there will be approximately 3,100 eligible children for the first wave, which are 6 and under. And obviously the aim for all officers and those who are involved in the various organisations is to optimise uptake. If everyone claimed the £10 a week, then that would be about 1.6 million of income into the local economy. And so obviously we're working with colleagues in the SSSA and other services of the council to ensure that this is publicised as best we can.
I think it's fair to say we're already, as a council, promoting it through our social media platforms as well. But the more we can do, obviously, to maximise the uptake, the better, absolutely. Elizabeth?
Yep, thank you. That's really helpful. It's interesting to sort of note the uniform approach that's been required to be taken as well. I really hope that we are able to cover all the families who need to know about it. The second thing that I wanted to say was just about section 2.4 of the report and one of the appendices, and just to thank Stephen for writing about the conditionality that we spoke about at the last Policy and Resources Committee, and just really noting the response that we got from the Minister for Employment. Just looking at the letter, and it says one of the paragraphs on page 46, sanctions are only ever used. We're looking at conditionality, and obviously we mentioned sanctions. Sanctions are only ever used when a claimant has failed to meet one of the requirements without good reason. And I guess I wanted to sort of say, I hope we as a committee can keep a watching brief on how that pans out, because I think good reason is quite a subjective term, and I just hope that it's applied rationally and compassionately across the community. And again, just hope that we can keep a watching brief on how that pans out.
Alan, would we be able to get information on sanctions from the DWP and include it in this report?
I could certainly ask colleagues from the Job Centre Plus if that's something that they're able to record and share.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it'd be anonymised information, but I think it would be useful if we could get that information and just add it to the report.
Thank you for that. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments, colleagues? No, so agree with the recommendation. Okay, that takes us on to item 7, insurance fund position as at the 30th of September 2020. Again, Alan.
Thank you. This is the annual insurance fund report, and it shows a £4.4 million balance on the fund at the 30th of September, with £3.4 million available for future claims, which these individual claims haven't been quantified yet, and in some cases will not have been received. It highlights, though, the current and future pressures, with the council potentially having to make a significant contribution to a national fund as part of the child abuse reparation exercise for which legislation is currently going through the Scottish Parliament. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Any questions, colleagues? Nope, don't see any. Agree with the recommendation. Okay, that takes us on to item 8, which is the Treasury Management Report 2020-21. Alan?
Thank you again. This is the mid-year report, which requires to be remitted to the council, to the full council for approval. In the first 6 months of 2021, external debt has dropped by £6 million. Investments have gone up by £20 million. So in short, it means that the council has a much improved cash flow. The main reason for this is due to the fact all the extra funding that the council has been getting paid, quite a lot of it up front from the Scottish Government in terms of addressing COVID, and they front-loaded the grants for this year. So we will see our cash flow get tighter as we go through the winter and into the spring. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Elizabeth?
Thanks. Again, thanks for bringing me in. This was a kind of philosophical thought that I had when I was reading through the papers, and it's just about something that I've kind of mentioned when we've had audit papers and things, and I just want to bring it up when we're talking about treasury management as well. How do we strike the balance? And I'm not even sure who I'm asking this to, so again, you can philosophically work that out between you all. How do we strike the balance between knowing that we're a financially well-governed organisation versus knowing that all the resources that we have at our disposal are having the impact that they should be having for the community of Inverclyde? It's something I've spoken quite a lot about. It's something I think a lot about when obviously I'm executing the duties I have as a councillor. And the Treasury Management document just sort of philosophically brought it to mind again, and I just wondered if there were any comments on that balance that we have to strike.
Alan?
I may be many things, but a philosopher is probably not one of them. But in terms of how everything hangs together, then obviously at the next council meeting, you get the financial strategy. And obviously the way our governance hangs together, the financial strategy links to the corporate development, the CDIPs, the directorate plans, which then link to the overall corporate plan. And I suppose you've got to tick all the boxes. You've got to make sure you've got the money to do things, and we're sticking with things like our reserve strategy, our treasury strategy. We're setting a balanced budget and then linking that into the areas which I'm less involved in around the outcomes and the development of the key actions and the priorities of the council. I suppose it's when you tick all those boxes, and part of that assessment is done by our external auditors. And at the last, we had a special council at the end of October, and the external auditors, by and large, were very positive about the council, both its finances, its performance, and how it was doing in respect of best value. And I suppose there's not a single button that flashes or anything that says you're doing it or you're not doing it. It's taking all these things in the round. I don't know if that helps.
It does. I guess I'm kind of trying to kind of tick all those boxes, if you like. You're saying that there are the things about how we govern ourselves as an organisation, but beyond the organisation, there's the function that we have. And I guess I'm just more acutely aware of the need, just as time goes on and as we see our metrics not moving in the direction we want to change for all the areas that we want to see improvement, just that the need for those two aspirations and functions of who we are and what we do to align.
I suppose the issue in terms of looking at treasury management on its own is that the more effective treasury management, then all things being equal, the more resources that we have to address those particular challenges we face. So if we can spend less money on service and debt, then that's more money for frontline services. If we can raise some extra money through investing our funds, then that extra money helps go towards funding services. So it's trying to make your money work as effectively as it can for the purpose of actually supporting your services. And we've seen where in the past Alan and his Treasury team and the advisors are being able to find ways of saving money on loans charges, which has meant, all things being equal, we've either been able to invest in services or been able to protect services. The difficulty at the moment is interest rates are historically low, both in terms of borrowing and in terms of investment, and that means there's not a lot of opportunities to generate extra savings or extra resources. You want to comment on that, Alan?
Thank you, convener. I mean, I agree. I mean, Treasury is something I can get really anarchy about, and there is, you know, we're spending 20 odd million pounds a year on loans charges, a lot of it supporting a lot of the council's priorities, whether that's the school estate, the leisure estate, the roads investment, the property investment, etc. But if we can shave bits off here and there, and I think if I was to think about it, probably over the last 5 years, we must have reduced our loans charges bill by over £3 million per year, which equates to about 9% on the council tax. That's been something that's we've managed to achieve, which has had no negative impact on service delivery. So me and the team are constantly looking at ways, and we will, as part of the forthcoming budget, to see if there's anything in there as well. We can borrow historically cheap. So it's ironic at the moment, I'm sitting with so much cash, it doesn't make sense for the council to borrow at this point in time. But as things tighten up, I think there will be, and the forecast is that interest rates are going to be low for the next 2 or 3 years, historically low for the next 2 or 3 years. So we do have an opportunity to reduce the cost of our service delivery through Treasury over the next couple of years, and I will continue to factor that into the Treasury strategy and the financial strategy.
Okay, David, do you want to come in?
Yes, Alan, you're actually considered to be one of the top anoraks in terms of Treasury in the country. I would like to continue on, you're talking about low interest rates. Have you had any hint from your advisors that we might end up at negative interest rates in terms of the money that we're holding?
There is no warning that is about to happen, but when you read the press, you think there is a risk that it's going to happen. So that's another reason for not borrowing unless you need to borrow. At the moment, I can say that in the last 2 weeks, the money we get on our deposit account is now down to 0.01%, i.e. 1/100%. So whether you've got 10 million in the bank or whatever, you're not earning a lot of interest on it. But as long as it doesn't go negative, then we will continue doing what we're doing. But we do have a strategy that shows that our reserves and our cash flow will reduce quite considerably, because I've got PWLB loans to repay in the next 6 months, that our cash flow will go down, and in the annual report, members will see that.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, Chris, you want to come in?
Thank you, Stephen. Well, my question is just really on the length of the loans we have, and going forward, how much of this historically low interest rates we'll be able to keep for 5, 10, 15 years.
Alan?
The Treasury and Capital strategy that went to Policy and Resources in February gives an indication of what our likely borrowing requirements are. At the moment, if I was borrowing, I would probably by and large be borrowing at the medium end of the market, time-wise. And in Treasury terms, that means probably between about 5 and 12 years. We've got a lot of long-term borrowing, and I wouldn't be looking to borrow at a long-term at this point in time, because that needs to be put against debt, and our loan debt is being repaid because we're not doing any major prudential borrowing. By that, I mean prudentially borrowing tens and tens of millions of pounds, because that adds to our funding gap, which obviously is a challenge at the moment. So we can't do major prudential borrowing without having a major reduction in spending other parts of the council. So 5 to 12 years is the short answer I'd be looking at. And at the moment, I'd maybe be looking at just over 2.5% for that.
Okay, Chana, you want to come in?
Just to ask that one, is it not worth his while spend to save on some of the items that he might have? Obviously, with the money being low, either to invest or to borrow. If we've got a lot of money there, it might be that we could do that, which save us in the long term. Thanks.
Alan?
Looking to invest to save money is something the corporate management team are continually looking at, whether that's through the properties, whether it's through IT, whether it's through vehicles, to see if we had more vehicles, whether we'd be able to save on travel and subsistence and issues like that. And the example that members have just approved, the investment in the electronic document management. You know, I'm not saying this is going to result in major savings, but it will make us more efficient as an organisation and allow officers to concentrate on their core job and less around shuffling bits of paper and photocopying things. So it's something we're always looking at. The interest rates will make things a bit more attractive, but the main thing is that the investment delivers a saving of any shape or form, and that's sometimes where we find the challenge is what saving that we would get looks like.
Okay, don't see any further questions, so can we agree with the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Takes us on to item 9, contract awards, 1st of April 2020 to 30th of September 2020. Gerard's going to speak to that.
Convener, thank you. This is the 6 monthly report, Convener, providing the committee with scrutiny with sight of those contracts that committees would not otherwise see by virtue of contract delegated orders. And that, of course, is within the limits of £25,000 to £500,000 for materials, services or works. I just pause at this particular point, Convener, just to emphasise that when it comes to any type of collaborative purchasing, the limits are different. So if it's for anything to do with execution of works, it's anything over £100,000 for collaborative purchasing or £25,000 for goods or materials. I just thought I should clarify that point, Convener. We've taken care of the detailed appendix to include all details of those contracts awarded in that 6 monthly period. We've updated the appendix to indicate the size of the supplier, medium-sized enterprise or the like in terms of that designation, and to also provide details of local companies who have submitted offers, and also we've included any blacklisting protocol requirements. There are none, Convener. These are all points of detail, but we'll be happy to answer any questions online or offline, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gerard. I've got Ronnie first, then Elizabeth, then Chris. Ronnie?
Thanks. Jerry, I note that no local companies submitted bids. Was that because they were not able to do so based on the size or type of business they were involved in? And do we assume that local companies were aware of the business opportunities, although basically none of them were able to bid? I think that would take me on to another part of it that says that, does that also apply to the fact that none of the contracts were lotted? I think there's just one that was lotted. So does that mean then that none of the contracts were suitable to be lotted? And I guess that may be a general one just to finish, Stephen, with your permission.
Sure.
So we're soon going to be out of Europe, Jerry, and I just wondered if you had any comment to make about European procurement rules. Is there any indication of how this might affect our kind of modus operandum? Thanks.
Okay, I'll bring Elizabeth in and Chris in, and then Gerard can maybe deal with all the questions. So, Elizabeth?
Thanks, Stephen. My question is to ask for an update on the action that we agreed at committee previously about doing some work with the Chamber of Commerce in terms of building better infrastructure for local companies to be able to access public sector procurement framework or the portals that look at what our procurement needs are. That was something that we had agreed that we were going to work with the Chamber on, and it was just to get an update on that.
Okay, Chris?
Thank you, Stephen. My comment is really just whether or not it would be possible to provide a little bit more information on the contract amount. A lot of the table includes just a schedule of rates, From my experience, this isn't usually a carte blanche. There's usually what do you call it, a budget estimate or a contract estimate of the overall value, and it'd be useful to get that in as well. Though it's a schedule of rates, usually what do you call it, you can't, a supplier can't go above a certain contractual value unless without further agreement. So it'd be useful to get an idea of the sort of scope we're talking about in these schedule of rates jobs.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Gerard?
Thank you, Convener. In terms of size or type of contracts and awareness, if I could deal with that point firstly, please, Convener. Obviously, my procurement colleagues take this very seriously in terms of the Council's approved procurement strategy in order to make sure that all tenderers, all likely tenderers are aware of every single contract opportunity. That's why there is a report back regularly, annually to the Council in terms of the achievements in terms of the Council's procurement strategy, and we can actually see the amount of spend that is allocated to local companies. In terms of Appendix 1, I can clearly see, of course, that there are many negatives in terms of the local companies with this particular tender batch. I cannot explain that either online. I would have to actually ask for the assistance of my corporate procurement colleagues in trying to address those points. But I can provide Councillor Alfield with the assurance that in terms of procurement strategy, we take every step to ensure either with the size or the type of a contract that all local companies are aware of this. This is a key factor in the Council's approach to local tendering. Beyond that level of detail, Convener, I'm going to have to rely upon my corporate procurement colleagues to assist me. In terms of lotting, there's a clear Council decision that we should look at every opportunity to lot these contracts in order to manage the situation and to allow smaller or indeed local companies, but smaller companies, the opportunity to fit in with a larger contract award. We do that with regard to the likely costs that are incurred by that virtue by reason of requirements for contract management and for legal liabilities and responsibilities for principal contractors, subcontractors or nominated subcontractors. This Council also will insist that we look at lotting well below the threshold that the lotting requirement is enforceable in terms of European procurement, and that we will look at any contract, particularly like it's almost half the value of the requirement, £1 million would be the level that we would start looking at that. In terms of the prospects for lotting, the requirement would be for £2 million or above. So we actively look for lotting where we can, but we have to balance that with value for money and the actual contract management procedures. In terms of the European situation, I would anticipate, as would my colleagues, a roll forward of existing European procurement principles. There might be points of detail that we will have clarification and guidance on, but I would certainly think that in terms of the generality of the approach and the regime, that is where we're likely to be going. And indeed, the Scottish Government guidance on that has, on an evidential basis, sort of reflected that over the course of the past year and longer. Councillor Robertson's point about the Chamber of Commerce has been noted and has been part of the minuted decision of this committee. I have to say, obviously, that's a report back that has been affected by my colleague. This is the first time I'm flying solo in this report, Convener, as you know, with Mr Hurrell's recent departure. And the corporate procurement manager's job has been advertised and is being followed up in terms of the recruitment process. That certainly is an item for reporting back in terms of Chamber of Commerce liaison and working with them in partnership in terms of local companies. That is a minuted action. In terms of the estimated contract amounts for schedule of rates contracts, we'll take that on board, Convener. We're seeking actively to improve this list as we go, and where we can, we will take that as an action point and insert that for future where we can. I hope that helps.
Okay, John's want to come in. Before John comes in, I know Scott wants to come in as well. I think it would be useful if we maybe have an update in the procurement strategy to the next meeting that can maybe pick up some of these issues as well. Scott, you want to come in?
Thank you, Convener. Just a couple of issues to assure you that we do maintain a close relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, and we're still meeting regularly with the Chair. And I see that as very important. Just to add what Jerry was saying about the list of procurement, the period covers the lockdown period, so it is an unusual list of procurement. And I'd be happy to go through it line by line, but if you look at the suppliers, in this case, most are specialist consultants, where simply the service doesn't exist in Inverclyde. And there's also some specialist suppliers of Roadstone, where there is no Inverclyde presence. So while it's disappointing to see no local interest in these contracts, it's an unusual list reflecting the period of lockdown from 1st of April right through to July.
Okay, thanks, Scott. John, you want to come in? You're on mute, John. That's you.
Yes. Come on.
That's you, John. Oh, you're back in mute again.
I don't know what it's doing. Okay, that's us now. I don't know what was happening there. It's just on the Appendix 1. I noticed there that there's two companies that we have current contracts with, one in Newry and one in Derry, and whether there'll be any implications once the UK leaves the EU and the legislation changed, as we are aware that the new border will run down the North Channel into the Irish Sea. So will there be any implications with the contracts with these two companies?
Convener, I have not any indication available to suggest that. Obviously, if there were, and if there were any financial consequences thereof, we'd be able to bring that back in terms of any necessary variation. But I have no notice of such an effect at all. But I accept Councillor Crowther's point for alertness and awareness for the future.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
I mean, again, that's maybe something that we would pick up in a Brexit update report as well, if there was going to be implications for procurement, particular procurement areas. Okay, so with those questions and the promise that we'll get a procurement strategy update and a due course a Brexit update, happy to agree with the recommendation? Yep. Okay, that takes us on to item 10, Statutory and Key Performance Indicators Annual Report 2019-20, and Amanda's going to speak to that report. We're not hearing you, Amanda. No, you don't appear to be on mute, but we're not hearing you either. Don't know if it's a volume on your PC.
Convener, I'm happy to kick it off if Amanda is unable if we're unable to hear Amanda.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll see if Amanda can obviously see if she can change the volume on her PC or whatever. But if you want to kick off, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Yeah, this is the standard annual report that comes to the committee in terms of our statutory performance indicators and the progress that has been made over the last year towards the achievement of our performance targets. So you'll probably recall we did have a review of our suite of indicators last year to make sure they were aligned with the corporate plan and all our priorities. So this is the second actual report that links to these specific indicators. You'll see from the appendix there's a significant amount of data attached to all of these on the commentary, and that's highlighted in Appendix 1. At a high-level analysis, you will see that we've got 13 of our indicators are green, having exceeded targets. We have 9 at amber and 5 at red. And there's commentary in the report around the 5 red ones at paragraph 5.7. And just the other thing for the committee to note is that there is we have the local government benchmarking framework. This is something that is issued by the Improvement Service in January, and that will be a far more detailed benchmarking report that will be brought to the committee in March to give us some more, which will be useful benchmarking and performance information and how we're doing compared with other councils. So we're just asking the committee to note the data for the financial year 1920, and to note that we'll bring back a fuller report that will also cover the benchmarking framework in March of 2021. I'm happy to take any questions on those areas.
Thanks, Stephen. Elizabeth, you want to come in?
I do, thanks, Stephen. It's actually just in relation to page 4 of the report, page 76 of our papers, and it's one of the indicators with a red status, the one about percentage of looked after children with a permanence plan within 6 months of being accommodated. I know that we were looking at the Celsius Pace initiative just to see to try to test a change in terms of that, and I think probably encouragingly with a test of change, we've not just kind of bought the farm. It's something that we're kind of going, it's not quite worked for us and we want to do something different. I'm just wondering if Louise can remind me, have we had a report to Health and Social Care about this? I'm not sure that we have. If we have, please forgive me. I'm sorry for not picking it up. And really just to see if it's not been deemed appropriate, sort of a bit of the journey as to why it's not been deemed appropriate and what we plan to replace it with, because I think we probably still do want to have children who are looked after in permanent places as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, Louise, you want to come in on that?
Through yourself, Convener. Councillor Robertson, you're correct. We haven't had a report in relation to Celsius work in relation to PACE to committee. I've got to say that the work was stalled and has been stalled in relation to the work that were going to take place to try another pilot has been stalled, as you would imagine, because of COVID and where we are. And members will remember that we've introduced 4 reviewing officers into the service, but we have significant challenges finding families at this moment in time in relation to COVID. We have changed a number of measures around this, and I'm happy for us to bring a future report to a Health and Social Care Committee that gives much more detail in relation to it, if that's helpful.
Elizabeth, you want to come back in?
Thanks. I'm on a tiny level. I'm just glad that my memory's not that bad and I didn't miss a report, but thanks for the offer of bringing one.
Okay, Amanda, just checking your volume. No, we still can't hear you, unfortunately. Okay, Ronnie, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's just a couple of comments. When I went through the indicators on page 87, 2C, the reducing antisocial behaviour indicator, and on page 90, I think it's 99, yeah, 99, the indicator details about carers who felt supported to continue their work in a caring role. I mean, those figures just kind of jumped out at me to say they don't look very healthy at all. In fact, they look abysmal. I just wondered if anyone would like to comment on that.
Okay, Martin, you want to pick up the social behaviour and Louise, the carers?
I suppose the difficulty with this one is it's the percentage of residents reporting a reduction in antisocial behaviour. So 10% is not great. However, if 10% compounded on 33% the previous time round in 2016 is probably significant. So it's actually a bit of a strange indicator because we're asking the same question every time, and if things continue to go down, then it will become more challenging. The difficulty, I suppose, is that we don't have figures for 2020, so we don't have anything up to date for obvious reasons to see where we are with that. But hopefully things will look better at the next one.
Okay, Louise, you want to come in?
Through yourself, Convener. I would agree with Councillor Alfield in relation to 39%, and you'll see that the years before it was 40. It's always been considerably low. We have put our strategy in place, and members will remember that we were the first local authority to implement sections of the Carers Act I've got to say, in relation to the carer service, we have a very good carer service in Inverclyde, and the carer centre has been very active. There is lots of work still to be done in that area, people identifying themselves as carers and coming forward, but there's no shortage of us trying to provide support in relation to that, usually through the carer centre, and obviously through Sharon and our team. We've done a lot of work in relation to young carers, which we picked up through the schools. But there is more action to be taken, there's no doubt about that, and we've got quite a robust plan around that. However, that plan is probably on hold now, because that plan was before COVID, and we've been dealing with the carer centre about how we support carers during the COVID pandemic.
Okay, you agree with that, Ronnie?
Yeah, Stephen, thanks, Louise. Louise, it just struck me, are there any specific aspects of that you're kind of zoning in on? You know, I mean, the figures look, I know you've said that there's action plans in place and so on, but those figures look really dramatically low. I mean, I just wonder if there were any specific aspects of the whole business that you were kind of targeting, or there was any common threads that you would say, well, we know that there's we're not really performing really well in this aspect of it, and this is what we're doing about it. You know, is there a common thread, for example?
Through yourself, convener, yes, there is a common thread, and it's. I mean, some of the problems is in relation to the surveys, but I don't think that's the issue. We already know from some of our carers that they waited for a considerable period of time before they really identified themselves as carers. There's no shortage, and I'll come back, there is no shortage of support for our carers. We have passed through all the Carers Act money and more in relation to supporting our carer centre. However, not everybody identifies themselves as a carer. We've done some work with Families Against Drugs to see if they can support some people to whom perhaps have caring responsibilities in relation to adults who maybe have substance misuse issues. But the biggest single thread for us is about people identifying themselves as a carer and getting the appropriate support to them, and around that, if you like. And so that's probably the biggest thing in relation to the action plan. And you'll remember pre-COVID, and I know that's quite difficult, that we were doing a campaign and there was quite a lot in the press in relation to carers, and I know that Councillor Crothers was involved with the carer centre and trying to do some kind of social media around that.
Okay, before I bring David in, I'm going to bring John in because his question specifically around carers. John?
Thank you, Chair. It's really just to thank the Carer Centre for the work that they're doing. Looking at this report, I would have literally tore it up. I don't recognise these figures at all. And what they do exist, and I'm really focusing on the 40% of the respondents who have provided a neutral response. Is there any way that the questionnaires can be worded and maybe sway many of them who are neutral to actually being positive? Is it anything to do with the questions?
Through yourself, convener, that's what I was alluding to in relation to the questionnaires, and I wish Amanda was on because there's so much more in relation to these questionnaires and how they're. But even without the questionnaires, we have identified by doing some work with in focus groups in order to refresh the 2017 to 22 strategy pre-COVID, that actually it was quite a long time before people identified themselves as carers. So that is an issue, and it's live for us, which is why, and I know that through yourself that you've been involved in us putting out some social media in relation to that. But there are always issues with these questionnaires, but I don't want to make any excuses in relation to that. We do know that there's an issue about people identifying themselves as carers.
I think, Amanda, you might be able to speak now. Oh, no, we're still not hearing you. It was just your mute button was showing up as if you were going to be able to speak. Okay, David.
Yes,
you've been waiting patiently.
I'm sorry?
You've been waiting patiently.
Oh, patience is one of my virtues, Stephen.
You've got many, David, you've got many.
There's a question for Martin. Page 115, 9F, pest control. I see that our response times are quite excellent to calls regarding pests. Could I ask in future, could we have a line that says what our success rate is? I've had a couple of instances and they've proved quite stubborn to eradicate the pests, and they went on for a wee while. Would it be possible, Martin, to have that sort of figure in future? Thank you.
I'm more than happy, through you, Convener, I'm more than happy to look at that. I suppose our difficulty might be that in not all circumstances are we required to actually follow through and actually treat. So some circumstances we will actually go out, respond to a pest complaint, go out, and there will not be a significant problem or a desire to actually take it further. So I'd have to look at how we did that, but certainly we can have a look. That's not a problem.
It might not be possible to incorporate that information in sort of national performance indicators, but it might be that it could be incorporated in sort of reports, regular reports to committee. So we can look at that. Okay, no other questions, colleagues? Okay, thanks. Can I agree with the recommendation? Okay, that takes us on to item 11, which is Inverclyde Council Annual Complaint Handling Report, 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020. And Carol's going to speak to that report.
Thank you, Convener. So this is the Annual Complaint Handling Report, which you'll be familiar with, covering the period 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. The report provides a summary of all performance information, analysis on complaint activity, and an update on learnings taken from complaints. There's also appendices that have been provided with the SPSO, the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman's statistical information provided on our handling of complaints, and the one case that was published for noting. Appendix 5 within the section 5, within the report provides very detailed lessons of our performance covering the period last year in 2018 to 2019, and our continued work will continue to be focusing in the coming year on the modifications that will be introduced as a result of changes in the complaint handling procedure, which the work is underway for presently. The focus would remain on our timescales, because we have seen some improvements in some of the stages of the complaint handling, and in other areas they've increased. And again, embedding the changes that will be introduced in spring 2021. The focus on learning will continue to be an area that we'll work on in the coming year, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I didn't propose going into all the detail within the report, because there's quite comprehensive data there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Chris, you want to come in?
Thank you, Stephen. My query is probably one or questions really to step back from the data. I'm looking at page 130 and looking at the graph, and it shows the complaints we're receiving have more than doubled in 4 years. So we're obviously handling the complaints well, and it looks like we're doing that sort of thing. But I'm just wondering, underlying this data, is this showing that as an organisation we're now getting less satisfaction from the citizens of Inverclyde, or is it the fact that people are more likely to complain now because what they they feel that they have that ability now to complain, or is it showing that there's a downward trend in the services we're providing? If it's possible for somebody to give us a comment on that. If it's not possible, I think it's rather worrying statistic there that we seem to be getting a lot more complaints if there's not any rationale for that. Apart from providing more service.
My layperson's answer would be we're now better at recording complaints than we were previously, but Carol will give the professional advice.
Yeah, so firstly, I agree with you, Convener, and thank you for your question. So yes, 1, we're recording our complaints more accurately. 2, we have introduced the introduction of our ALEOs into the recording. So when you're comparing our complaint volumes, they will look higher than what they would have previously done historically. The other factors in there is that there was some previous misreporting that was undertaken where we'd lost some of the data in previous years. But I would say that those numbers are not exceptionally higher than when you compare us to our other peers. When you look at the statistical data, we kind of are still probably lower on the complaint volume. I think it recognises accuracy in reporting, and I think we should continue to be realistic in saying that complaints may go up. and there may be at times some digression in service. For example, if we think about the current period that we've been working and living through, we will see some of that impact in the complaint handling volumes that we have seen in the coming year. But what I would say is that every effort has been made by the services to respond to things as accurately and timely as they possibly could have under those circumstances.
Okay, Chris, you want to come back in?
Thank you. I'm also I'm hopeful that what they call it, that we do have this sort of situation where it's a case of we're recording the complaints a lot better. But I'm just looking at the tables, and when I look at the numbers there, it seems to suggest that in 2017 to 2018 we had 225 complaints from Inverclyde Council, and then it was 121. So it seems to be that it's Inverclyde Council that's mostly what they call driving the increase in complaints. So that's to do with our reporting, as maybe more to do with the ALIOs, the HSSP Inverclyde Leisure and Riverside Inverclyde. So there seems to be a jump up from 2016-17 to 2017-18. But I suppose after that point in time, depending if that's where there's been a change in approach, we seem to be relatively consistent. So would you agree with that? We seem to have had a change from 2016-17 to 2017-18, and after that we've been relatively consistent.
Yeah, Councillor. Yeah, so going back to 2016-2017, there was a loss of complaint data that wasn't included in the reporting. That was at the point where I did my first set of annual reporting, so I'm very familiar with that particular issue. And as you say, if you look at the numbers thereafter, it was very consistent, in terms of the trends that we see around about the 200 mark. But it's just looking at the collective. I think we've seen the numbers have introduced an increase as we've gone with those other introductions, but there was a loss of data in that first set of data you were referring to.
Okay, no other questions or comments? Agree recommendation? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Dan will move Councillor Robertson to the lobby as she's declared an interest.
Okay. Bye, Elizabeth. We'll see you soon. Okay, you're back on again, Alan. So item 12, governance of external organisations. Alan?
Thank you, convener. Another annual report coming up today, and this one is the one this is now entering its 10th year. Would you believe that this has been getting reported to the committee in terms of how the council interacts with its key partners, in the external sector? This year, the report picks up the fact that COVID has had a major impact in the regular set piece meetings that form part of the framework. Generally, there's one or two set piece meetings a year to discuss all matters to do with governance, the financial situation, performance, etc. But the reality is that they have been replaced in many cases by far more frequent informal meetings, which, as the report says, probably emphasises the key role many of these organisations have played in supporting the council in its COVID response, a lot in the health and social care side, a lot in the community side. And so as a result, there has probably been a lot more informal governance and support going on, with extra funding being allocated, which was reported to the Policy and Resources Executive Subcommittee throughout the early days of COVID, etc. The proposed organisations, hopefully next year, will begin to get back to the normal way of working. And the proposed organisations are shown in Appendix 3, and it can be seen that the council in 1920 spent £43 million with these organisations. So it just emphasises the importance of this exercise that officers undertake. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Chris, and then Ronnie. Chris?
Yep. Thank you, Stephen. I think mine is more of a sort of like a general question related to 6.1, page 157, about the £200,000 from the anti-poverty fund. What we're just trying to, my question would be, how do we actually make sure that organisations know that this fund exists? How are we getting that information out there to see what other organisations could maybe be able to apply for that, to maybe who are not on our current list? So just trying to see how we can actually, how we go about making sure that we cast our net wide enough to identify organisations that maybe through this money would benefit the people of Inverclyde.
Okay, I'll take Ronnie before I come back to Alan. Ronnie?
Thanks, Stephen. I think it's Appendix 1 for me. And there's a touch of deja vu here from me, because I most certainly remember asking this question last year and perhaps even the year before. And my question basically is that I see among the organisations that we are giving grants to, we have no service level agreements. I find that absolutely astonishing, really, really astonishing. And I think if I look at, from number 12 to 17, I am not for 1 second suggesting that the organisations do not deserve to have grants. That is not my point. My point basically is, what is the expectation? Why do we not have a service level agreement for the organisations who are getting this money? And if I really wanted to emphasise it, I would go to the very second last one, number 76, which is Greenock Morton Community Trust, who are given a significant amount of money, and we have no service level agreement. So what would we be expecting of Greenock Morton Community Trust to do for us in Inverclyde? Basically, how would we be able to measure it if we don't know, we don't have a service level agreement? I find that astonishing.
Okay, while you ponder that, Alan, I've got John Crowther want to ask a question. John?
Thank you, Chair. It's basically on 2.1, where it is mentioned that the council has extended this to other organisations which meet certain criteria. Now, that could come in with what Councillor Alfield has mentioned, but it was just to get some further information on what is this certain criteria.
Okay, Alan, do you want to pick those up? And if you need assistance, obviously, from your colleagues, I'm sure you'll draw upon that.
Thank you, and thanks for the questions. If I can take them in order, the £200,000 anti-poverty fund isn't a bid fund. I think that's an important thing. This isn't like grants to voluntary organisations. This was a sum that was set aside for some of our key anchor community organisations who, whilst they have been able to access some funding from the various COVID funds, we know are going through some difficulties, and a report went up to Education and Communities committees regarding one of those, and a sum of, I think, £40,000 was agreed at the last committee. And I'm aware of another couple who colleagues in community, the community learning development are liaising with. So really, this is something where organisations approach the council, some of our key partner organisations, many of whom are on this list. And through our regular meetings, we're picking up that they've got an issue that they've seen. If they rely on income from a cafe, they rely on income from lets, etc., that has all dried up through COVID. And so we are putting together proposals, and they go to the Education and Communities Committee. I've got no doubt that that money will be utilised in the next 12 months. Regarding the issue to do with SLAs, Councillor Arfield is 100% correct. He has raised this on a number of occasions, and it's a presentational issue here. What I've done in Appendix 1 is present what was presented to committee last year. If Councillor Arfield goes to Appendix 3, which is the new organisations for the forthcoming year, he will see that none of the organisations have a grant with no SLA, and that's because largely through Ruth's team and Louisa's team, all these SLAs are now in place with support from colleagues in legal and finance. So hopefully that provides that reassurance. The final point that was made by Councillor Crowther regarding the other criteria, this goes right back to the genesis of the scheme, where these are not services that by and large we tender for. They're not local tenders where there would normally be a financial check. So these are organisations we view that are potentially more vulnerable. And as a result, part of our, if it was a formal tender process, it'd be like supplier management, but this isn't supplier management. This is about, having a meeting, to talk about how well they're doing as an organisation, but also to be assured that they're being run correctly. In a manner that we want them to, because there's been a couple of high-profile cases over the life of this council where some big organisations have got into difficulty, and this is trying to preempt that and highlight matters to both the corporate management team but also committee where it's appropriate. happy to answer or clarify any of those points.
Okay, Alan, I'll bring Ruth in. Ruth?
Just to say that there was a full report taken to the November Education and Communities Committee that might answer some of Councillor Elfield's questions. Agenda item number 17.
Okay. Okay, any member want to come back in, or any other member want to come in? No.
Stephen, just
running.
Sorry, just perhaps just to conclude on my question. Thanks for that, Alan. Appreciate it. And I'm looking at Appendix 3 now. So, based on that, do we assume then that there are no organisations that have been given grant aid or funding which we do not have some sort of agreement for? They are commissioned, or we have tendered, or we have SLAs.
Alan?
Thank you. There are none that meet the criteria for this report, which is that they must be given over £30,000 in the previous 12 months. I couldn't sit here and say that in the grants of all orgs there may not be a £1,500 payment going out to an organisation. We probably wouldn't enter into an SLA or anything like that regarding that. I don't know if Ruth can clarify what the detail of that process is. But it's certainly, there's none in this that would qualify for this, and this covers the vast majority of the value in the organisations.
Okay, Ruth?
No, and what I would say is, just building on what Alan said earlier, sometimes just small amounts of grants that build up, but I'm not aware of any. Everything we've got we've worked hard for the last couple of years to get to update the service level agreements and make sure they're all in place.
Okay. Okay, can we agree on recommendations? Yep. Okay, that takes us on to...
Sorry to interrupt. Diane, I'll just bring Councillor Robertson back from the lobby.
Okay.
She's back.
Okay, welcome back, Elizabeth. Okay, taking us on to item 13, delivering differently, an Inverclyde update. Alan.
Thank you. I think it's my final annual report of the day. This time on the Delivering Differently programme. Members will recall that Delivering Differently was set up as part of the council's response to transformation as part of the Best Value audit in 2017. And the directorates have change boards, and the key projects from the change boards come into the Delivering Differently programme. The Delivering Differently progress is discussed with the trade unions through the joint budget group, and there's an annual report comes here. From the report, members will note that there are 3 projects which are now complete, and these would be dropped, and in Appendix 2 there are 3 further projects it would be proposed to add. The report also seeks approval, as it has done for the last 2 years, that the Chief Executive been given approval to carry out voluntary severance trolls in the areas to inform the findings of some of the projects, but that no officer, no employee would be released without approval from the relevant committee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Any questions, comments, colleagues? No, don't see any. Agree with recommendations? Okay, that takes us on to item 14, 2021-23 budget update. That's one of your separate papers, Alan.
Thank you, Convener. This report provides an update regarding the latest position of the 21-23 revenue budget. Appendix 1 proposes a number of adjustments and savings to generate £695,000 worth of saving in the funding gap, and if agreed would close the funding gap to approximately £10.2 million before consideration of any council tax increase or further savings. The report seeks approval for a report to come to the 3rd of December Council outlining the potential uses of reserves and the part this would play in the 21-23 revenue budget. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Any questions from colleagues? No? Okay, agree recommendations? Right, takes us on to item 15, Anti-Poverty Fund update again, Alan.
Thank you. This report provides, firstly, an update in respect of the £1 million recurring anti-poverty budget that was agreed by members when they set the budget in March 2020. That's provided in Appendix 1. Specifically, the report highlights that it's probably not surprising that as the country responds to COVID, extra funding has come in which mirrors funding which members already set aside. Now, the funding, which is part of a £30 million fund announced by the government, has to be spent by the 31st of March. So as a result, the report is seeking approval that we spend the government money first, and if there is any underspend in our £1 million anti-poverty funding, that's added to the anti-poverty earmarked reserve. So it's not lost, because undoubtedly some of the uses which are outlined for 2021 will continue into 21-22. So the report highlights proposals to spend an estimated £500,000. When at the time of writing the report, I just had to estimate how much we were getting. I got the first grant offer letter a couple of days ago, and that is offering £426,000. And I'm waiting for another grant offer letter that may offer maybe around about another £100,000. So it's going to be just over the £500,000 that we get. You'll see the proposals in section 6. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I would highlight that at a rough estimate, the proposal in this report will benefit around about 7,000 residents of Inverclyde.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Robert?
I thank you, Convener. Convener, it's on 6.2, and just reaffirmed that although this committee we talk millions, we do listen to our constituents, and I just a few weeks ago I got a letter from the Port Glasgow Old People's Association, and regarding the Christmas dinner, with the officers such a building, the Port Glasgow Town Hall, and obviously this is cancer caused by COVID, and they were asking could they get a voucher, and it's really good for me to see it. The committee has took cognizance of that request, and they're going to be giving everyone £15. Which will be a great help, especially if you're on your own over Christmas. So I'm really thankful for that, and also the support for the iHeat, which should be fantastic news for people in our community, and I really think it's great it is on this agenda today.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Ronnie, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's the same one as Robert. It's 6.2, and it's just a general question. Again, I would definitely support the proposals here. But on the iHeat question, I just wondered what the qualifying criteria was. Maybe I should know that, but I most certainly do not recall certainly being involved in that before. I mean, locally, I'm involved in the Guruk Coal Fund, which basically sets out to do more or less the same thing. But I just wondered what the criteria was for people qualifying to benefit from that. Thanks.
Okay, I'll bring Chris in first before I bring Alan back in. Chris?
Thank you, Stephen. My comment was just really to ask how we were going to get the message out with regard to the £15 voucher for each elderly applicant, because I know I've been contacted by people who are sort of like hearing word of mouth that they might be able to get the Provost Fund, etc. So it's just to try and allay people's fears. I take it we're going to do a little bit of publicity about that, getting people to be able to apply for it.
Okay, Alan.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, the iHeat scheme has been around and funded from the welfare reform monies probably since about 2014. It was one of the first schemes that we implemented using the funding that was set aside, and that has run at about 30 to 40,000. It's now £40,000 a year, and it's administered by the Wise Group on behalf of the council. And they operate largely on a referral basis. We've had contact with the Wise Group. They did run a specific event, I understand, up at the hospital. I think it was 18 months ago, and that got a big uptake promoting it. So what they do is they have to manage the pot of money that they've got. And so they know when to, if I can use the term, turn the tap on and turn the tap off. And absolutely, from Louisa's service, having spoken to Jim Percival at the Wise Group, they are absolutely delighted if members were to agree to that, and they're confident they could spend £100,000 in providing support to, they're looking around about 970 elderly people with a £150 grant. If I may convene, and apologies for this, given that the sums, I'm not sure what the sum is going to be and there's limited time to spend the money, it would be helpful if the committee could consider giving delegated powers for that sum to be varied, maybe by up to 20%, £20,000 if demand is there and the resources are there, to make sure that the funding is all utilised from the Scottish Government. On the voucher issue, if I can maybe pass over to Louise, who will be able to advise how the scheme is being promoted.
Okay, Louise.
Through yourself, convener, each year Your Voice undertakes this on our behalf, and I know that we have the word is out in relation to this because there's a number of because obviously the individuals have been told that the scheme will be open. That we expect a bigger demand than we would have had if people were coming to Christmas lunches, which is why we're asking for additional money if it's agreed today. And then we will use our usual publicity through social media in order to get the message out. And also, obviously, we will use our staff who have an awful lot of contact with people who are older.
Okay. Alan, just in terms of the eligibility criteria for the sort of iHeat scheme, are you able to clarify that, or can you get some further information out to us?
I can absolutely get information out. I know it's a referral service, but I don't know the specific criteria that enables somebody to be referred to the Wise Group.
Okay, we'll get that additional information. Anybody want to come back in or ask a further question? No. Okay, so can we agree the recommendations and the additional request from Alan that we allow officers some flexibility for the support through the iHeat programme if there's additional funding to sort of vary that?
And can we limit that to a maximum of £20,000? Is that appropriate? And will that be to the corporate director or to the chief financial officer himself?
Well, yeah, I'm happy either way.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, agree with that. Okay, that takes us on to item 16, the Accounts Commission Local Government in Scotland Overview 2020 report, which was the subject of a briefing we had recently. I don't know, Amanda, are you able to talk to us? No, we're not hearing you. Stephen, are you able to step into the breach again?
Yes, thank you, convener. I will do that. Yes, this is really to bring to the committee's attention the publication of the Annual Accounts Commission Local Government Overview report, and really just highlight some of the issues that's been brought out in that report, and hopefully the committee to agree some improvement actions that are arising from the report. The report was published back in June 2020 this year, and you'll see from the covering report here that it focuses on some of the challenges, the complex landscape in which councils are operating. It also highlights the need for councils to do things differently. So the key messages and the challenges are outlined in section 5 and 6 of the report. And as you've already alluded to, convener, to ensure that we did a comprehensive self-evaluation of the Inverclyde Council position against each of the areas that were highlighted. We did present some information as a corporate management team, but then we had the focused development section on the 27th of October, and there was good attendance of that from elected members. So the table that's attached to Appendix 1, it basically highlights the key outcomes from that a session that we had at the end of October, highlighting the improvement activity that we'd identified through that session. So really the report is basically asking the committee to note the publication of the Accounts Commission report itself, and agree the suggested improvement areas, and to note that these will be aligned to the relevant CDIPs and the corporate planning and improvement arrangements that we have within the council. But I'm happy to take any questions on the report itself.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Elizabeth, you want to come in?
It's a comment, Stephen, rather than a question. It's really just to say thank you for the briefing. It was quite cathartic, actually, taking part in it. It was quite interesting. But also, more importantly, it's really thank you for reflecting really accurately what we did talk about at the briefing and the response. Yeah, I'm sure you'll appreciate that I can watch very closely. We just noted what was articulated, and it really is. It's a really clear line of sight from what we said to what's actually been put in the report. So thank you for all of that.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Any other comments or questions, members? No? Okay, a great recommendation. Okay, that takes us on to item 17, National Records of Scotland, Life Expectancy in Scotland 2017 to 19. Again, Stephen, are you going to pick this up?
Yes, I can try and give a brief overview for this. This is really just to provide the committee with the details of the National Records of Scotland, the recent publication around life expectancy in Scotland, and it covers the period 2017 to 19. And it's really just to highlight some of the data in relation to Inverclyde and how we compare with the rest of Scotland. So you'll see from the report and the appendices that life expectancy in Scotland has remained virtually unchanged, really going back to 2012-14 period. Scotland has the lowest life expectancy, unfortunately, in comparison with Western Europe and the UK in the recent report. And details of that are highlighted in Appendix 1 that's attached. We also have a spread right across Scotland. Life expectancy varies considerably across Scotland. Appendix 2 in the report gives you some more information and analysis around the different Scottish Council areas. What the report does highlight is that the extent to which life expectancy varies across Scotland and shows that deprivation continues to have a high detrimental impact, and that's outlined in the report as well. The National Records of Scotland have also highlighted that they intend to publish more detailed information around deprivation and the links to life expectancy in December. And I think that will allow us to do further detailed analysis around some of the data zones within Inverclyde, where there's greatest inequalities. And that will give us some more information to feed into some of our proposed sort of actions going forward. The report itself, just to finish off, Appendix 3 provides more detailed information around males and females compared with Inverclyde, compared to life expectancy across Scotland. Appendix 4 really gives you an overview of the deaths by age group as a proportion of all the deaths in Inverclyde in Scotland in 2019. And Appendix 5 gives a bit more information around the increase in the annual number of deaths in Inverclyde as a proportion of the population since 2011. So really, in terms of the report today, a couple of things for the committee to note. Obviously, to note the publication of the report itself, to highlight that we've got a further report that we intend to bring back once we have that more detailed analysis around deprivation. We'll be able to drill down into our own data zones, provide the intention is that we would then bring a report back to the committee once we have that information. This information will be getting submitted to the Alliance Board. I noticed this report says that the meeting on the 7th of December, that's actually been rescheduled to January. So just for noting that, it will be January, the next Alliance Board meeting. And we want to, given the amount of data and analysis within this report, we want to remit this to the Population Partnership Group to consider and agree any additional actions arising from this new data. But I'm happy to take any questions on the report if anybody has any. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. I'll bring Elizabeth in, then Ronnie, then John. So Elizabeth first.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a comment and a question. The first comment really is just if you look at our female life expectancy being second worst in Scotland, or male life expectancy being third worst in Scotland, then really this is why, you know, for everybody who needs to hear it, this is why we get exercised and annoyed and not happy about services leaving our area and things not being here and accessible or as accessible as we feel they should be for a population that just isn't living long enough, would be my first comment. And my question is really the final bullet point in the recommendations about the remittance to the population partnership for consideration agreement of any additional actions arising from the data, just to get a sense of what we think any actions might be. What actions do we really feel are going to be the things that are going to change this metric?
Okay, I'll bring Ronnie in and then John. Ronnie?
Thanks, Stephen. A comment and a question from me as well. It's in the intro, but it's 210. I must say I was really quite surprised to see that the most notable difference in the age range, 60 to 69, that proportion of deaths in this group was higher here than in Scotland. I found that really quite intriguing. But my question really is that on 216, when it says that the life expectancy rate, for example, potentially with detrimental impact on the effectiveness of the Inverclyde Alliance's repopulation activity. Now, I don't quite follow that. Why is that? Why would that have a detrimental effect on what's being planned? I really don't quite follow that. I must be missing something. Thanks.
Okay, John.
Thank you, Convener. I thought that Councillor Alfield was actually going to ask the same question as myself. When he had noted that the age groups between 60 and 64 and 64-69, where it's substantially higher than the Scottish average, and was just wondering if that was legacy issues, i.e. ones working in the likes of the shipyards and contacting the likes of asbestos and the working conditions through the likes of the shipyards. I just wondering if that was the reason why that age group was actually higher.
Okay, Stephen, you want to see if you can put those points?
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to the members for asking the questions. I mean, I think in terms of the actions from the population group, I mean, I think, Elizabeth, you're absolutely right. There obviously are a whole wide range of issues here around health that probably do need to be explored, and I think the population group gives a forum for the more analysis in terms of in-depth some of the data that we're getting. And I think once we get the more detailed information around deprivation in December, then there's the potential actions that can be developed from them. I mean, I know Scott might want to come in terms of the lead for that particular group, but you know, I think that significant actions may well be around health. There's obviously issues around, that's highlighted in the report, about drug-related deaths as well, and how that might impact on some of the 35 to 54-year-old deaths. So there's a fair range of data that's in the report that could potentially be further analysed and lead to improvement actions or areas that we can address some of the issues. I mean, in terms of Councillor Alfield's point, I mean, I think we're just trying to highlight that obviously the natural process in terms of births and deaths that we've highlighted in previous reports, clearly this has been an adverse effect on Inverclyde's population. And I think we were just trying to highlight that particular point. And in terms of Councillor Crowther's point, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. We don't have the actual detail at this stage in terms of the causes of death, so we can make certainly some assumptions about this, but this might be something that we get more information when we get more data in December that we can actually focus in on that. But Louise might have some more information on that as well, potentially.
Yeah, I'll bring Louise in, then I'll bring Jim in, and then Elizabeth back in. So, Louise?
Through yourself, Convener. So we've done quite a lot of work in relation to the IJB strategic plan and understanding why people don't live as long in Inverclyde. We understand the long-term conditions and what our top long-term conditions are, and it's a bit like child poverty. There's a whole range, there's a basket of things that you need to do in order to address inequalities, and inequalities are intrinsically linked to life expectancy. And so there's a whole range of things that we've already done, and there's more that needs to be done in order to incrementally build a better picture to get a healthier population. And I don't know whether it's linked to the docks and shipyards, but certainly the long-term conditions, COPD is one of those long-term conditions, as is heart, dementia, they're our top three. And so all the actions we need to take in relation to long-term conditions will link into that. Sorry, I'm getting feedback.
Yeah.
But there's a whole range of reasons, and I'm happy to. It's in our strategic plan, so there's lots and lots of things that we already do, and there's a lot of more things that need to be done in order to try and address some of these issues.
I mean, I think it would be helpful when we get the further report that's planned, that we get some more in-depth analysis, I suppose, once the population groups had a chance to look at this. Okay, Jim, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's really just on that. I think we've got to be very careful, because obviously one way to increase the average life in Inverclyde would be to build £1,000 million houses in Kilmacombe, and by that you would probably automatically change the actual average age. I think more worrying for us is that disparity within Inverclyde itself. You know, if I used Kilmacombe as an example, the difference between Kilmacombe and the centre of Port Glasgow is probably marked. The difference between, as we well know, the centre of Greenock and the west end of Greenock is marked. So within my own ward, you would have a major disparity with the life expectancy without needing to look at the Scottish averages. So I think for us, when we actually go into that in-depth detail, or we look at that in detail, it's what we would expect. We would expect that the lower SMID areas are going to have a lower average life expectancy. The higher SMID areas are going to have a higher life expectancy. So I think what this tells us is that Inverclyde is a microcosm of Scotland, and within Inverclyde itself, we have serious issues between one side of Inverclyde and another. It's just really a comment, because I take Elizabeth's point of view on board, but we do know we have got these in-depth issues within Inverclyde itself, historical issues that we've all tried to deal with over many, many years.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Elizabeth, you want to come back in?
Completely agree with everything Jim said there. The point I wanted to come back in about was about drugs deaths, actually, when they were brought up by Stephen. Just reading today, obviously, that what we've asked to kind of have a look at, we asked through the Health and Social Care Committee a few weeks ago to look at naloxone for police services, and that's been decided already that 3 local authority areas are going to be actually doing a pilot with the police for carrying naloxone, which I think personally is a really interesting test of change to try and bring down that metric of drug deaths. And so Glasgow, Dundee and Falkirk have been selected as pilot areas for. And again, I'm kind of going, and this is actually linked to the next agenda item as well. I'm kind of going, how did Glasgow, Dundee and Falkirk get at that table? How have they become pre-approved to be the pilots for that, and why was that not us? One, because we wanted to do it. You know, we've said it was something we wanted to pursue, but again, you know, the 3 authorities who've been chosen, they've been at the table, that decision's been made, and now that pilot won't happen here. So we won't have a chance to see if that change, that actual physical change, could have an impact on our drug deaths.
Louise, you got any light to shine on that?
To yourself, Convener, Councillor Robertson's right. We have been very active through the EDP, asking it to be a pilot in relation to illness with our police colleagues for a number of months. In fact, it could be more than that. It could be for the last 2 years as we've tried to put pressure on naltrexone being distributed. We are a pilot in relation to the Scottish Ambulance Service. They're going to carry it, and they're going to carry it in Inverclyde, but it would have been really helpful. And it's about how we make sure that we're linked in so that we can protect for some of the things that are very, very prevalent in Inverclyde.
Okay. Right, so we're happy to agree recommendations on the basis we're going to get a further report, and hopefully that further report will include some sort of thoughts on what action we should take in response to these figures. They obviously are figures that are sad to see. I mean, it's sad to see that life expectancy in Scotland across the board, after quite a number of years of increases, is stalling, and it's no surprise the sort of the declines are happening in areas like ours as well. But I think, as Jim's rightly pointed out, there are extremes in Inverclyde as well that we need to be aware of and need to use to inform our deliberations and actions. So I think it is useful to get that further rounded report. Okay. Moving on to item 18 is the programme for Government 2021, and Scott's going to speak to that.
Thank you, Convener. This report summarises the key messages in the programme for government and seeks a mandate for officers to engage as set out in paragraph 3.1, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. David, you want to come in? You hear us, David?
I'm sorry, I lost sound as well as vision, but this time it was my fault. Scott, this is a Scottish government document which we are hoping to implement. I would like to go to 4.2, and about 3/4 of the way down it says complete the delivery of 50,000 affordable homes as quickly as it's safe to do so. Do you feel that in Inverclyde we are contributing towards this target, particularly in terms of socially rented houses?
Okay, I'll bring a number of people in and before I go back to Scott. So Elizabeth next, then Ronnie.
Thanks for bringing me in. I can't even say it's a question or a comment, it's a rant. Thank you for bringing this paper. It's really, really helpful to sort of see what we can squeeze out of the programme for government, because I think this is something that we should be doing on an annual basis. And I'm going to put on record that for the first time in my life, I was jealous of Moray. Something that has never happened to me before, and it's something I hope never to experience again. But basically, they were again pre-approved in the programme for government when the Scottish Government announced in that document the amount that they were going to be spending on reforestation. They mentioned that the Forestry Commission lands, another tranche of investment, and Moray Council getting a pre-approved amount for reforestation. And I read that and I went, why am I not seeing Inverclyde again in this programme for government? We've got nothing that's pre-approved with the government. And so I would urge us to kind of try and get at the table and be pre-approved the next time the Scottish Government does have a programme for government on something. And there's two things that are articulated in the programme that I think we have got a clear line of sight to, and I'm wondering if we can progress them. And one is the National Advice Agency, and the other one is the National Energy Agency. I can't see a reason in the world why either or both of those could not be located in Inverclyde. And again, they are articulated, they're expressed determinations of the Scottish Government that they want to do them. And again, my question out there would be why not here, and how can we progress them from here?
Okay, Ronnie.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, good paper and excellent objectives. And 4.3, they're all very worthy, and the one that kind of resonates with me is basically helping young people grasp their potential, which is something really close to my heart. But in 4.4, the very last sentence, it talks a wee bit about the bid, the £10 million in-screen bid, and they've been successful up to stage 2. I just wondered if we could have if there was any additional information on that, or when we would hope to hear that we have been successful at that stage, and if there's any other additional information that would be useful for us to have. Thanks.
Okay, Robert. You're still in mute, Robert. You're still in mute.
Aye, it's 2.2. It's the specific nation made of funding for the Clyde mission. If you're going to develop a cycle track to run the length of Inverclyde, a few years back I was up at Glasgow City Chambers when they said it's probably disgraceful. We didn't have a cycle track running from Glasgow City Centre right down the riverside to Inverclyde and beyond, and the opposite bank, the north bank of the river. So are we going to talk to Renfrewshire and Glasgow to develop this cycleway which will run from Glasgow City Centre right down to Inverclyde?
Okay, Scott, got a number of questions there for you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'll try and answer them in the order they were asked. In terms of 4.2 and the contribution to the affordable homes, I think there has been a significant contribution made by Riverside with River Clyde Homes. I think there's a long way to go in that. One of the challenges we've got through studies like the Eastern Gateway study is levering in more capital grant to Inverclyde to not just build new homes, but to address the condition of existing properties. So we would like to strengthen the council's position under that. And the homes part of the 1.6 billion, especially the making homes more efficient, is a significant opportunity for us. I guess on the fact that Inverclyde is not at the table and is not mentioned, I think the civil servants' response would be that we are in the context of City Deal and Clyde Mission. So they haven't picked out Inverclyde specifically, but they have put in Clyde Mission the £10 million and the £25 million. I think there is certainly a case for Inverclyde to be at the table both as officers and politically and looking for opportunities as we move forward. And I think that's a challenge for all of us, is to punch above our weight in this kind of document. And you picked out Moray. And I would agree, there is a case for national agencies to be located in Inverclyde, and our success rate has not been great in that in the past, so there's a job to be done. In terms of the City Deal bidding process against the £10 million, the stage 1 bid was successful. The stage 2 bid, we should have known the answer, I think, last week. I believe it now might be the end of this week or next week. So we have significant bids in against Inch Green against that. And clearly we would hope to be successful. We think our project is of merit to be successful across all the bids, which far exceed the amount of money that's available. With respect to the cycle track, I have to say, to be honest about it, I'm not aware that we're having strategic discussions with Renfrew and Glasgow to take a cycle track all the way along the Clyde. And I know this has been discussed many times in the past. I think one of the challenges is that councils are getting the funding ring-fenced, and most councils then do their cycle infrastructure within the council boundary. I think there's a challenge there, though, Councillor Moran, for us to take this up and see if we can do more with it, especially given that this year we've had almost £1 million of ring-fenced additional funding for sustainable transport, and I'm happy to take that away.
Okay, thanks for that, Scott. I mean, I think it would be useful in terms of the recommendations that we have a progress report in terms of the engagement. So maybe a progress report in the next but one Policy and Resources Committee, just to see how we're getting on in terms of that engagement. Okay, Elizabeth.
That's part of what I was going to suggest. I was actually also wondering if we could possibly articulate the things that we're going to get a report on. I think we know some of them already. Some of them might emerge, but we know that we want to kind of have report on the Clyde mission side of things that I take Scott's point is already articulated there. But I would be particularly interested in seeing how we pursue the national agencies side of things.
Okay, I mean, I think in terms of the Clyde mission, I would expect Scott will get a report to Environment Regeneration on that. But I think it would be useful if we could get a report on the national agencies as well, just as sort of look at what they are intending and what we can offer. I mean, I don't know whether we're going to end up in the same situation as the National Social Security Agency process, but I think it would be useful to get an idea what the government are planning, get a report back in that. Okay, can we agree that? Okay, thanks for that. Right, moving on to item 19, which is Freeports. Martin, you're going to speak to this report?
To the best of my abilities, Convener. This is a report to update members on a letter we received from the Minister for Trade, Investment and Innovation on the current Scottish Government position on free ports, and also to update on the imminent commencement of the bidding process for free ports in England. In the Scottish context, the UK Government has a declared ambition to have at least one free port in each devolved administration. But what we lack at present is detail on both any bidding process and the legislative details around free ports. And I think that should probably be borne in mind when considering recommendation 3.3. This recommendation is really intended to keep Inverclyde's options open, and clearly we'll be bringing a report back to committee to allow members to make an informed decision when all the details around both the bidding process and the legislative details are known. So if possible, I'll bear that in mind. I'm happy to take any questions to the best of my ability.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I don't know either you or Scott, but in terms of the Clyde as a potential free port, what sort of discussions have taken place with sort of neighbouring councils on that?
Convener, if I could maybe bring in Stuart in this one. I think there's been discussion on this through the Glasgow City region.
Okay, Stuart.
Through you, Convener. There's certainly been discussions with ourselves in Glasgow and Renfrewshire and Western Berkshire about the possibility of a Clyde free port. Clearly, we have two major transport hubs in the form of Greenock Ocean Terminal as well as Glasgow Airport, and to a lesser extent, there's the KG5 docks in Glasgow. So the very, very high level discussions about the opportunities which a free port would provide, but they are, as I say, high level simply because we don't know any of the detail in respect of the terms of engagement within the free port, recognising that a free port should be centred around a dock, but it doesn't need to exclusively be the land surrounding the dock, and it could be the whole of the Clyde corridor.
Okay, I've got a few people want to come in. Elizabeth, you want to come in?
Convener, later on, I'm hoping to kind of review the recommendations and put forward an amendment, if that's okay.
Okay, David, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say that I'm very, very supportive of activity with regard to Freeport. Our candidate in the Westminster election, Arun Malik, brought it up at a hustings in the Beacon, and extremely supportive. I think it's what's needed to bring jobs to Inverclyde. It would be an enormous boost. The one thing that I was really quite disappointed in the letter from Ivan McKee, it's one dated the 10th of June, and he says, "While the Scottish Government is happy to examine the potential of free ports, we remain of the opinion that the best interests of Scottish businesses and the promotion of international trade are best served by close alignment with the EU." Now, that amazed me, because the EU represents about 16 billion of our exports, whereas the rest of the UK accounts for 52 billion. So I really was quite amazed at that comment there. But I do have a question for Martin. Would it be our intention to write to both the Scottish and Westminster governments to say that we are keen on having a free port in Inverclyde?
I think what I was trying to, through you, Convener, I think what I was trying to put across was that we do need more detail, but what we want to do is engage to say that we are interested in pursuing the option. So rather than actually saying we want to have one, because I think we need to come back to members with full details before we could do that.
Can you not take authority from this meeting to go and say we'd like one?
Well, we'll come to that, David, because in some senses, I don't really know what a free port is, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know what I'm asking for. So, Jana, do you want to come in?
It's a very good thing, Stephen.
No, I'll take your word for it, David. That's it. I don't need a report. I'll just take your word for it. It's a very good thing. Right, Jana, you want to come in?
Thanks, Stephen. Well, you see, I've put 4.1 because it says the UK government has also stated that there will be a package of tax relief for businesses investing in the Freeport, together with measures of planning rules for a Freeport area. And I'm going to go back to when they decided to make the enterprise zone. We had no control over it, and we lost a lot out. In fact, the big place in Port Glasgow, but the rope works, that was getting sold for 25,000, and the next day it was 250,000. We had offices doing it where Scots, across the street for Scots, that were built and left with not a person in it because the developer got the same amount of money as if he'd rented it. And what would worry me is if we put our head in the box and shout for us what I think we've got to look at, we suddenly find these developers that will sit there and then walk away and get the money. They're getting money for doing nothing other than building it, and then leaving us where we're trying to get people get jobs. And I just wonder how the safeguards would be in it, what the difference between what we got before and what this is, because we need safeguards that the developers are going to look for firms to come here that we can get people employed and not just sit there with empty offices and get paid for doing nothing other than building it. That was my worry, Stephen.
Okay, Janet. Tommy, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Stephen, I have to confess, my knowledge of free ports is quite limited. So I think it's essential we get as much information as possible on the positives and on the negatives. What it would do for Inverclyde. Do we need it to progress the Edge Green proposals which are currently ongoing? So I certainly would need a lot more information before maybe I make a final decision on whether we progress this. Thanks.
I think that's a perfectly fair point, Tommy. I think the reality is what we're seeing is the Scottish Government's no convinced at this point in time is needing further information, and they've no come to a view. Free ports won't happen in Scotland, presumably without the support of the Scottish Government. The danger for us is if we were to say no to a free port at this time, and then the Scottish Government decides that actually they can develop a model of free port in Scotland, which they think would be beneficial to Scotland and obviously particular areas of Scotland. And by that point, we've ruled ourselves out of being interested in some sort of principle, then I think that would be short-sighted. But equally, for us simply to say, yeah, we think free ports are a fantastic idea, let's have one, without actually knowing what a free port actually entails, would be equally. And there have been free ports in the past in England, I think even in Scotland. But this is a sort of new round of free ports and a new concept, which I don't think we've got enough information to, at this point in time, to say it's a bad thing or a good thing. Okay, Elizabeth, you want to come back in?
Thanks, Stephen. Similarly, I've had to do a decent amount of background reading to get information about free ports. And from the research briefings in the journalism and some academic journals that I've read, I'm not convinced that they're a great thing. And I'm particularly compelled by a briefing from the TUC, and it's on the basis of that really that I wanted to make some changes to, or propose some changes to recommendations. And the proposal would be to delete recommendation 3.3 and 3.4 and have alternatives put in place, which I'll read out if that's okay.
Sure.
So the new 3.3 would be: the committee notes the concerns of the TUC in terms of free race to the bottom on workers' terms, conditions, rights and working practices. The committee also notes concerns regarding the tax status of free ports, which could result in a reduction of tax revenues that fund public services such as the NHS. The committee does not support the principle of the establishment of free ports. And 3.4 would be changed to: committee notes that a free port may still be established on the Clyde. Committee therefore requests that officers bring back a report setting out the full implications to Inverclyde of the establishment of a free port on the Clyde.
Okay, that's perfectly clear. Anybody want to come back in or come in? Who's not already been in? No. Okay, right. I think that's fairly clear. I mean, I have sympathy with the amendment and the spirit of the amendment, but I don't think that at this point in time, I think we know enough about actually what form of free port we're talking about, and I couldn't anticipate that the Scottish Government would lend its endorsement to the type of free port that's referred to in the amendment, Elizabeth. So I think we should maintain a watching brief in terms of this and see how the government goes, and not rule out participating in a free port, because I think it would be. I mean, you were mentioned earlier in the context of the programme for government report. Why not us? Well, if, for example, colleagues in Renfrewshire and Glasgow and West Dunbartonshire and places like that decided that actually once they knew what the model of free port was going to be, that was actually a good idea, and they would be supportive of developing a Clyde bid. But we as a council had already ruled out that participating in that bid, that would both weaken the bid, but equally you could end up in a situation the bid might be successful and Renfrewshire and Glasgow and West Dunbartonshire get the benefit of that and we don't get the benefit. So I couldn't support the amendment. So I'm happy to move the recommendations in the report. Tommy, you want to come in?
So yeah, thanks, convener. I certainly sympathise with some of Councillor Robertson's issues she's raised in her amendment, but unfortunately, at this point in time, I can't see him against the principle of free port, so I can't support her amendment at this stage. But I certainly recognise some of the issues she raises.
Okay, any other political comment?
Obviously, I was quoting against what happened before, and the reason it was that, I don't know what the free port is like you completely, and my main concern is bringing work to Inverclyde and how we bring it. And I think before you've got to put your name in the hat to try and win the prize. And the prize is if we put our name in the hat and we don't like the conditions, you can always take it out. And I think that's what we've got to look at. Seriously look at, because everything we look at seems to disappear and we're at the tail end as usual. And it's a shame because, well, the one good thing is we've got better water down here, what they've got in Glasgow is deeper. So we might get the container ships up or whatever they do. But seriously, that's my concerns, how to get work to Inverclyde.
Stephen, could I ask a question, please? Sorry.
Sure, David, on you go.
Will the SNP amendment be in writing in the minutes?
Yeah, I'm sure Gerard's got a note of the amendment. And Gerard, before we go to a vote, Gerard will read out both the motion and the amendment, whatever he decides to be the motion and the amendment. Okay, anybody else wish to come back in before I bring Elizabeth back in? No, okay, Elizabeth, you want to come back in? Wait a minute. Chris is wanting to come in. Elizabeth, you want to come in before Chris? You're the group leader, he's the deputy, it's up to you.
He kind of snuck in there, I'll let him sneak in.
Okay, Chris?
No, I'm happy to follow my leader.
Okay, right, okay, I'll come back in then. I don't need to be asked twice. I guess in terms of supporting what we're putting forward, the distinction I would make would be between jobs and good jobs. And I think any time I've ever stood and asked anybody to select me or elect me for anything, I've tried to make that distinction, that we don't just want jobs in Inverclyde at any cost or any type of jobs. We want to make sure that they are good jobs, and that we want to make sure that any opportunities that come to Inverclyde actually do have an impact on the community of Inverclyde that's beneficial. And there is, it's hyperbolic to say nothing, but there is so little in what I have read about free ports that would lead me to believe that that would be the outcome of them. That's why I feel we've had to bring forward this amendment today. Okay, Chris, you want to come in?
Yes, Stephen, just to reinforce, I think, the point made by Elizabeth, to a free port to get to the point where I think we'd want to actually agree to it, wouldn't really be a free port. It would be something else. It would be an economic area or something like that. Because for our concerns is to actually get the benefit of what do you call it, supposed benefit of bringing these kind of jobs to Inverclyde. What is the cost to Inverclyde as well? It's not a we have to balance these two things, and I'm really concerned that to actually get us to get to the point, we wouldn't be agreeing to a free port really. And I think a free port has significant disadvantages to both what they call it, health and safety, to what they call it, long-term job security, to things like that we don't really want to bring into Inverclyde or to Scotland or indeed to the UK. In reality, we'd want to try some sort of free trade area that encompasses a large amount of people, maybe 500 million or so, and that we could then maybe use that to maybe try and maximise trade in Inverclyde.
Okay, but maybe I'll just close the debate with reiterating the point that I made earlier on, that the Scottish Government hasn't ruled out developing a model of free port for Scotland. So the letter from Ivan McKee essentially says that the government are still considering it, but they haven't said no, under no circumstances are we going to have a free ports or free ports in Scotland. And the danger is if they develop a model that they think ticks the boxes that could be supported by the STUC, trade unions, etc., and is an ethical model of free port, if you can develop an ethical model of free port and they decide to have 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 in Scotland, the danger is that they will be in other places. As has been said, they could be in other parts of the Clyde, or they could be on the Forth, or they could be on the Tay. And that's the reality is. So if the Scottish Government's not prepared at this point in time to rule out developing its own Scottish model of free ports, why should we as Inverclyde Council support an SNP group motion that effectively would make a decision in advance of an SNP government taking a view on free ports? We will not have a free port in Inverclyde if the government doesn't support it. But if the government supports it, then we should at least look at it. So I do think it's premature to rule it out. So that's why I've moved the recommendations in the report. So over to Gerard.
Thank you, Convener.
Just before that, sorry, Elizabeth turned around and said about jobs. When I say jobs, I don't mean ordinary jobs. It's just down the line and then they disappear. I was talking about jobs all over the place in this area. So they were good, really good jobs, and not just walking away as they've done elsewhere. And I think that's something, whether I like it or not, it's something we've got to look at, because there are people out there desperate for a job. You've heard me saying it before, sometimes a part-time job makes a difference between having a biscuit once a week and having bread all week. And I don't mean that wrong with the MD. I've been in that position now and I've seen it. And I just think this is something we'll look at it and we can still say no. But if you don't look at it, you can't say no. And that's why it says you've got to put your name in the hat to turn around and see what we can get. And when the government, Scottish Government I'm talking about, make their mind up whether they can do a free port, then we can say yes or no. Can we have our name in the hat? We can say no to it then. And I think that's the way forward.
Okay, thanks, Gerard. Gerard, over to you.
Thank you, Convener. I'll follow our standing orders procedures for this vote. Firstly, in terms of that, we have a motion, and the motion is from Councillor Robertson, as it was made firstly during the progress of the committee. And that motion from Councillor Robertson is to approve 3.1, to approve 3.2, to delete, however, 3.3 and 3.4, to substitute for 3.3 a proposal that I'll have the direct wording from Councillor Robertson that says that the committee notes the concerns of the TUC relative to a race for bottom in terms of worker practices, and that basically Councillor Robertson's motion is that not support the principle of establishing a free port. I know that there's a narrative that Councillor Robertson can provide me with the detail from the TU representations. The next item was that paragraph 3.4 being deleted, it be replaced with a recommendation that a report be brought back to the council on all of the principles affecting free ports. That's how I understand the thrust of Councillor Robertson's motion, Convener, and I see that Councillor Robertson is assenting. From yourself, Convener, you have made the amendment, Convener, in terms of the standing orders. The amendment is in terms of the recommendations as written. If you would please bear with me, Convener, just in these circumstances, I haven't been able to note down exactly Councillor Robertson's wording. Councillor Robertson will be able to provide that to me separately. And in terms of our procedures, Councillor Robertson having moved that motion, but I think Councillor Robertson has already summed up the debate, and it's just to clarify with Councillor Robertson that she has actually done that because she is entitled to sum up the debate as the mover of a motion.
I have, thank you, Jerry, but also I've emailed you the wording.
Oh, thank you for that. Convener, can I have your guidance? Would you wish me to read out the exact wording, or would you accept my summary thereof?
I think your summary is acceptable. I think we know the issues, and happy for the exact wording which was read out earlier to appear in the minute.
I'm obliged to you, Convener, and also to Councillor Robertson. I see her email in front of me just now. Thank you for that. So we have the motion from Councillor Robertson, and that is basically not to support the principle of free port at this stage and to ask for a further report on principles. And we have your amendment, Convener, and the amendment is per the recommendations on page 217. I will do a roll call vote in terms of procedures. I will ask for motion or amendment. Councillor Alfeld, Councillor Robertson's motion or Councillor McCabe's amendment?
Amendment.
Councillor Clougherty?
Amendment.
Councillor Crowther?
Motion.
Councillor Curley?
Motion.
Convener?
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh? Oh, beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Councillor McCormick. My apologies, Councillor McCormick.
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh?
Amendment.
Councillor Moran?
Amendment.
Councillor Rebecca?
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson?
Motion.
And Councillor Wilson?
Amendment.
Thank you, councillors.
You can't put your name into it until you get a... Do that later on.
Yeah.
Convener, I have as the motion 3 votes and the amendment 8 votes. I declare your amendment carried. The recommendations on page 217. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gerard. Moving on, colleagues, to item 20, employability interventions in Macleod Jobs Recovery Plan. Stuart and Stephen are going to speak to that. Stuart.
Thanks, Convener. I'll introduce the report with the collaboration of Mr McNabb, who will talk us through the refresh element. There's barely an hour goes past without someone commenting on the impact which COVID-19 is having on our economy, or indeed the labour market. At the time of writing this report, the information available to us identified that the UK economy contracted by 22% over the first 6 months of the year. It is estimated that during April, the Scottish economy contracted by 23.7%. And despite 4 consecutive months of growth, Scottish GDP is still 9.4% below the pre-pandemic level in February. The significance of this contraction can be contrasted against the financial crisis and subsequent recession in the late 2000s, where GDP decreased by approximately 4% over 18 months. Colleagues in the Glasgow Intelligence Hub are suggesting that we could be facing a double-dip recession. Before this news, we thought that the unemployment figure in Inverclyde could reach 11%. Further research by the Fraser Valander Institute identifies that prior to the pandemic, £1 in every 5 was being spent online, and in May of this year, this had risen to £1 in every 3 being spent online. The landscape in terms of interventions is ever changing, whether that be in the support of interventions from Westminster or support interventions from Holyrood. My officers and I have reviewed these interventions, a number of which are set out in paragraph 410. We've reviewed our own programmes and the programmes of others and set out a series of measures to stimulate jobs activity within Inverclyde, which we know works. Section 5 sets out our proposals. We're proud of our apprenticeship scheme in Inverclyde and would like to expand our apprenticeship programme, offering 10 technical apprenticeships, and would like to offer the 10 apprentices who are on our current cohort a 1-year post. We know that our graduate programme has enjoyed excellent success and would like to offer 14 graduate places within the public sector or voluntary organisations over a period of 18 months. We'd like to expand our wage subsidy programme in 3 strands: 1 for graduates, 1 for employers achieving the living wage. And convener, whilst the council does hold fast on the living wage, I believe that we have to offer this opportunity to those who cannot afford to pay the living wage. And I'll now pass on to Stephen to describe the council refresh programme.
Stephen. Thank you, convener, and thank you, Stuart. Yeah, in terms of the council's refresh programme, there's really sort of two key drivers to this. Obviously, creating job opportunities for local people within Inverclyde is one, and this is also an opportunity to address some of our workforce demographic issues. As you'll probably know, we've got about 30% of our workforce over the age of 55 now as well. So really the idea behind this is to create vacancies across a number of our establishments and jobs by allowing employees who are looking to leave the organisation have early access to their pension and allow them to do that. And we know there's a fair bit of interest out there from recent trolls we have done linked to budget savings. So that's the idea behind it. Corporate directors have had a look at their own establishments to identify what might be suitable jobs for this purpose. So we're really focusing on lower graded jobs, entry-level jobs that would be suitable to offer out to the local community, and particularly those that might be furthest from employment. Those that would be getting released, you know, there's obviously a potential cost implication there around this. We have decided to propose that there would be a ceiling with regards to the cost, and we'll see that in paragraph 511, that we would costs that would be over £40,000 over a 3-year period, then that would not be considered appropriate in terms of this scheme. Anybody leaving the service in these circumstances, they wouldn't be getting a redundancy payment, so it's a reduced package than what would normally be offered to those that would be leaving under a budget savings situation. The focus of the troll would be around those that have got access to their pension, so essentially those 55 and above would be the sort of targeting area. I've highlighted the value for money basis of this. You'll be aware that in budget savings we have specific value for money whereby there needs to be a break even within a 3-year period. Clearly this is different because we're not making any specific savings by deleting a post that somebody has actually left. We're actually creating a vacancy for an employment opportunity for somebody to come into. So that's why criteria slight changed for the purpose of this particular scheme with a ceiling cost of £40,000. And basically In terms of equality side of things, we obviously have done an equality impact assessment around this, which is a background to this particular report. That's highlighted a very positive impact in terms of addressing some inequalities across Inverclyde, particularly around the Fairer Scotland duty, addressing some of the inequalities in terms of access to employment, opportunities, and there might even be an opportunity there for a more diverse and inclusive workforce in terms of recruiting to some of the posts that will hopefully become vacant. And it ties in with some of the Lloyd priorities as well. So we would be looking to any posts that are created through this, we would be looking to advertise them on a permanent basis. So it's a long-term job prospect for anybody coming in to join the council. And in terms of the calculations we've made, we estimate that we could create 60 posts through this particular scheme that would be advertised within the local community, and that would be the intended process. So we're looking to run this scheme with individuals leaving the organisation over the period 21 to 22, and that would just take into account workforce planning implications of releasing people, and also costs as a key criteria as well in terms of decisions to release employees. So that's all in the refresh scheme. Stuart, if you want to go back to yourself.
Thanks, Stephen. Convener, I mentioned a review of national programmes, and we believe that the Kickstart programme is worthy of support. And we believe that we should expand the programme with Kickstart Inverclyde. Rather than a minimum wage over 25 hours for 26 weeks, our programme contracted through DWP would offer the living wage over 37 hours over 52 weeks. We have a number of business support interventions which are in existence, Convener, and we'd like to complement this with grant support for our start-up businesses located with the principals located in SIMD areas. I mentioned earlier that our town centres are under huge pressure, and we would like to support them with a dedicated officer from a business development perspective. We consider this to be a necessary, exciting opportunity. If members are minded to support this the report, can I ask for another recommendation be introduced, Convener, i.e. in the interest of facilitating early implementation of the refresh programme, officers are given authority to commence the trawl in advance of any decision which may be made by the Council at its meeting on the 3rd of December 2020 to allocate funds. Stephen and I are happy to take any questions, Convener.
Okay, thanks, Stuart, just as well, because we've got some questions. David, first.
There is a headline figure here of 200 jobs for 6 million. I don't know the value of that, but most of the report I'm quite comfortable with. Where I am uncomfortable is the refresh programme. I think it's the comparison between us as the public sector and the private sector. The private sector's hurting out there. We've got 9,000 people in furlough who are only getting 80% of their wages. Self-employed, many are getting no grants or anything at all. Businesses are closing. It's really tough out there. In terms of pension scheme, you're fortunate in the private sector to get a pension scheme that puts in more than 3 or 4%. We contribute 20% of our salaries into the pension scheme, which is a colossal amount of money. And here we are using that pension scheme to add 3 years, which is something that won't be happening out there in the private sector. So really, my question is, this doesn't give us any extra employees. It's light for light. Yes, an older employee leaves and a younger one comes in, but it gives us no extra employment numbers in terms of Inverclyde. And I'd just like to ask Stephen, does he really think this is value for money? And would he consider putting this back for PR purposes and image purposes until perhaps September 2021, until the COVID pandemic is over, when it might feel more appropriate to do it? Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, I'm going to bring in others before I come back to Stephen and Stuart to answer any questions. So, Elizabeth, you want to come in?
Thanks, Stephen. I'm fully supportive of the itemised intentions in the paper. I think if, as one of the biggest employers in the area, as the people who do hold the community at the heart of everything that we do. If we can't send out the message that we want to support people back into employment, then I don't know who can. But just a point of clarification, that the jobs that are indicated in the paper aren't entirely or necessarily entirely council jobs. There are opportunities for other public sector, third sector, private sector organisations to also bring forward opportunities as well. Is that correct?
Yep, we'll come back to that. Okay, Ronnie.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I mean, I'm generally supportive of the paper and a lot of the initiatives. And I guess it's a comment from me. I don't necessarily need a response to it, but I noticed that in the Young Person's Guarantee on page 229, the first full paragraph, it talks about the critical role of colleges in delivering meaningful opportunities for young people. And I think it mentions further on that £10 million is going to be allocated to create additional opportunities. So I guess my comment would be, what additional opportunities do we think the colleges are going to provide? And if in fact, is there going to be any, if in fact we're coming up with £10 million, is there going to be any caveat that potentially would say that if it's West College, it should be West College Inverclyde?
Okay, Shanna, you want to come in?
Ronnie just gave my question away, convener. I was actually marked it. But what I'll say is, there's a little rumour, well, there's a lot of stuff going out now, and they're going to do away with hairdressing and beauty stuff. Girls now in there, so there'll be nothing for the younger people to go. It's doing that because they get sent to Clydebank. I think that's something we should be looking at. What are they going to provide locally, and what services and what courses are they going to do? I just think that's awful. They're also downgrading. They're asking for redundancy, and they're downgrading lecturers to tutors. Now, I know tutors in some cases are okay, but always remember John Thingy Bradley up in the garage turning around and telling us that diesel mechanic had to go to Kilmarnock because they could only go so far at Inverclyde and they wanted to finish this course down there. That's the sort of things we've got to look at and make sure we can have our courses in here that turn around and take people here and make sure the kids here get every opportunity to get a decent job and a better way of living. That's the only thing I'd add.
Okay, right. I'll bring Stephen in to deal with a specific issue around the refresh programme raised by Councillor Wilson, and I think the rest of the questions are for Stuart.
Okay, thank you, convener, and thank you, Councillor Wilson. In response to Councillor Wilson, I mean, I think this is the right time to do this, hence why we're bringing this forward. Stuart sort of outlined earlier on in his presentation around the SIMD figures, the unemployment figures, and the situation that we're trying to address in Inverclyde at the moment. So I think this is the right time to do it. We do have some workforce planning concerns as well around the demographics of our workforce. We have an ageing workforce, and this is a real opportunity to bring younger people in and make our services more sustainable going forward and train them up and give them a potential career within local government in Inverclyde. So I think it is, I fully appreciate Councillor Wilson's highlighting the costs associated with this. But I think it is a necessary action and a good value action in terms of taking it forward at this moment in time. The other point that I was going to respond to was probably Councillor Robertson's just around Alliance Partners, and you may want to add to it, Stephen. I know that we have contacted Alliance Partners with regards to supporting these kind of initiatives. In terms of jobs creation and apprenticeships. So I think that's something that we will be working with Alliance Partners on in the months ahead, Elizabeth. So I could maybe just follow up that for you.
Okay, Stuart.
Can I through you, Councillor Robertson? The opportunities for the graduate places which are fully funded would be within the public and voluntary sector. The graduate places, which would be in the private sector, would be 50% funded because that's a stated requirement. And in terms of the other two wage incentives, they would be available within the private sector. So there is a wide range of interventions available to both the public sector and the private sector. Councillors Rebecca and Alfeld, Young Persons Guarantee, recognising that it's a suite of packages. What we need to be absolutely clear in is that there isn't any duplication. Sorry, my mic is shuffling, as been pointed out by the Chief Executive. I apologise for that. It's not me shuffling papers. The Young Persons Guarantee, there's an opportunity for us to work with the college. We have had some initial engagement with the college, but we haven't engaged with them fully yet because we wanted committee endorsement for this suite of measures. And I think that what we have to do is work with them to ensure that they're delivering the right courses in the right location. And that's me. I think I've answered all the questions, Convener.
Okay, thanks for that. Jim, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Comment. I suppose from my point of view, when you actually look at it, we've talked about throughout the paper anti-poverty measure. This is an anti-poverty paper. The best way to get people out of poverty is through work. So what we're actually doing here is an anti-poverty initiative, or various anti-poverty initiatives. I mean, I asked a previous meeting about the multiplier effect. This is putting money in people's pockets. These people are going to be spending the money in Inverclyde. And I think from a council's point of view, bearing in mind how limited their resources are, I think that this is a good initiative that we should all actually be quite proud of, actually, in doing something like this during the middle of a pandemic. And the various bits on it, I was looking at the Kickstart programme. I mean, I can remember back when we had the Future Jobs Fund, which was a great boost to the young people within Inverclyde. And an awful lot of these things, I reiterate, this money is not going outside Inverclyde. Anything that we put into this is going to be staying within Inverclyde. So I welcome the total paper. And I think it's something that we should all be proud of as councillors and as officers.
Okay, Elizabeth, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks. I almost put a wee marker down when we were looking at paper 15. It's one of those, you kind of put the cat before the horse, chicken before the egg, which came first, blah, blah, blah. But and I know we've not actually agreed the recommendations of this paper yet, but if we do, then I would like to think, and this is something that I brought up at the Members' Budget Working Group, that the anti-poverty money that we've laid aside for employability could be used to absolutely max out, exactly as Jim's saying, to make sure that this anti-poverty measure, which it clearly is, has absolute maximum impact by making sure that the precarious time between moving from being on benefits to getting your first wage, that kind of working line time and all those kind of things, that those types of practical barriers that actually make it difficult for people to take the risk with work, which sounds ridiculous but is actually true, that we're able to put some of that anti-poverty money to work to make sure that these provisions that we want to put in place through this paper are actually going to realise for people.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I mean, it will fall to me to move the recommendations. I don't know if Councillor Wilson is going to move an amendment or not, but I mean, I think this is one of the most important reports that we've had before certainly arguably the most important report before this council, and certainly one of the most important reports I've had before me in my time as a councillor, which stretches back a few years now. We're in an employment crisis. There's no doubt about it, and we need to act to try and support our communities. And I think the best way to support our community at this point in time is directly through jobs. And this is for Inverclyde Council, this is an enormous package of investment. Given the size of our council, if Glasgow was talking about a package of investment of this order, you'd be talking about a 60 million or so investment. So for us, a £6 million investment is a huge investment in trying to support people to get into work and employment. Some of them are permanent posts, absolutely. Some of them are temporary posts, but once people have got into temporary posts and got experience and skills, then it makes them far more employable. So I think this is hugely important, and I think we are also addressing some of the issues that have concerned us as an employer as well. When we got our most recent report on the workforce and the profile of the workforce, that was one of the issues that was highlighted, the demographics in the workforce. And I think there'll be quite a number of staff who'll be happy. They've served the council well, they've done their bit, and they maybe want a wee bit more time to themselves, and happy to free up opportunities for younger people. So I'm more than happy to move the recommendations in the report, and obviously if anybody wants to move an amendment, they're free to do so. Okay, any amendments? No, okay, can we agree recommendations?
Convener, can I just clarify that there is the additional recommendation?
Yes, and the additional recommendation that Stuart read out.
Agreed.
Okay, right, thanks for that. I think that's the end of the business, so thank you for your attendance and participation.